Fun.
Fun?
3, 2, fun.
All right, 3, 2, fun. All right, welcome everyone to the Facebook Live feed of episode 92, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
episode 92.
Episode 92. I think you're going to have to unplug my microphone already. It can't be heard. I'd rather have that done now.
That's why I wanted us to do a mic check.
There we go. I heard it click in. So, again, welcome to episode 92 of the Bourbon and BS podcast. We've got Spencer Lappin here, and we have volume on someone's phone, and also Nate Hale, whose phone that is.
That's not a phone.
All right, whatever.
What is that?
That's a Kindle Fire's a work anniversary gift.
Not a thing.
Yeah.
I heard they're going on business.
I love how this is going to go already. I love it.
So tonight we've got these guys on. We've got a couple of different, and I'm going to let Nate actually explain the whiskey, the cigars real quick, and also the sponsors so that I can go ahead and share this.
Yeah. So episode 92 is being brought to
it.
you by Tinder Box at Easton. They are providing our first cigar of the night, the feature cigar. That is the EP Encore. So we'll get into why it's called the Encore and some of the accolades that it has received. Second sponsor is Altadis USA. So Romeo and Julieta, Monte Cristo, H. Upman, Onyx, Butera, a list of others. They will be providing our second cigar of the evening, which is the Romeo by Romeo. And then third sponsor is BS Cigar Company, Brian and Steve. We got plenty of silvers in stock at the shop and getting closer to the day that the golds come back in. So
That is absolutely right.
looking forward to that. And technically, I guess we can kind of call our guest today, Spencer, as the fourth sponsor, since he is the one that graciously bought the 3 microphones that we use for this podcast, as well as the old Pogue Master Select that we will be drinking this evening. So Spencer's got a printout of the history of that, so I'm sure he'll be able to...
Why? It's all in the head, bro.
They can see it. I can see the paper. So, yeah. We'll get into the cigars, get into the whiskey, and start the recording here in a minute. As soon as we get all the sharing
and kind of explain, share and do all the promo stuff there if you would.
That's what I just did.
All right. It's taking longer and longer with the new updates of this stuff. So,
or is it because you now have so many groups to share it to?
No, it's not it.
How many groups are you guys in?
Ask Steve. I share it to like half a dozen.
Half a dozen groups.
More than that.
Me.
What's everyone smoking tonight? I'll do it. What's everyone smoking tonight? And share what you are drinking on, what you're doing on this nice fall/winter evening.
Seasons are changing here, Crane.
They are. Spencer, how you been, man?
So good, man.
Let's do some small talk off the air here.
Small talk off the air here. So it's funny. Last time I was here, it might have been like a little too hot.
Yeah.
And now it's a little too cold. But
fair. You're very picky.
I'm not picky. Observant, some might
Fair.
say. Yeah. But it actually feels pretty good here in the garage.
When was the last time you were on, Spencer?
That's a good question.
I know Steve and I looked it up a while back.
I don't know, man. I think this might be 7 or
August,
8 or
I think.
9, something like that. One of those. I should be getting one of those jackets that you guys have promised me.
We've been talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
About how we're not going to do it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was about to say, if we're giving jackets, Dustin and I are sitting there going, wait, where's ours?
How many of these have you guys, do you think, been to? Of the
Been
92?
to or been on?
Been to of the 92-ish.
I would say probably about a third of them.
Oh, I thought it was going to be way more than that.
Well, I mean, I've been on. I think this is maybe 13 or 14. I know Dustin was on for a long period of time, and then Dustin and I know I've been behind the camera more than I've been in front of the camera.
It's a lot of sexual tension between the two of you and competing on this
Not
podcast.
at all.
I can sense it in the room.
In the room.
You lowering it?
All right, Nate,
No.
you want to go ahead and start that the audio there?
Dustin, were you going to say something real quick?
Oh, I was just.
What's that?
I didn't know if you were asking me or just him or what.
Is there sexual tension
No.
between you two? Okay.
Good. Thanks for clarifying that.
All right. Our viewers are asking, so.
Ryan Newman says a lot of
Humorous or
sexual
just, I'm
tension.
pretty sure it was just
See, Newman knows exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, let's do the audio here, and everyone stay tuned and, again, share and like and do all that good stuff.
Oh, we got a glass clean?
No. Happy Thirsty Thursday. Welcome to episode 92 of the Bourbon and BS podcast. We are doing the live on Facebook, so if you guys are available on the nights that we're doing this, join our Facebook page as well as the community page and get involved with the conversation and let us know what you're smoking, drinking, and also what you think about the topics. We are accompanied tonight by Spencer Lappin, who has been a part of the podcast several times before. He is a friend of the program. Would you say long-time listener, several-time caller?
I didn't know we were allowed to call in, but if we were allowed to call in, I would definitely call in. But long-time listener, big fan of the show.
And how do you listen to the podcast normally?
I always listen to it on either 1.5 speed or 2 speed on iTunes about 4 days after it launches.
How do I sound on 2-speed?
Okay, so I have a Toyota
Okay.
4Runner, and the bass on the 4Runner cannot handle your...
That's like a rapid fire that speed.
I got to
too.
turn the bass down and the treble up to really get the full sense of it, but...
Do you enjoy it when your seat rattles a little bit? Like, there's a rumble? Rumble.
it rattles.
You're giddy right now.
Just thinking about your voice in my car, it's just
Oh,
the experiences.
Jesus
Everyone
Christ.
loves the Facebook
Kind of
experience.
reminds me of a scene from the Private Parts movie
Absolutely,
about Howard Stern.
yeah. No, Spencer and I we've done that.
Sat on a speaker.
One of us has.
I listen to it on iTunes. It's just the way that I have time to enjoy it. I'm on the road a lot for work, so it's an easy way for me to kill 2 hours of time. And I think I've listened to every episode and try to give you some notes one way or another.
Absolutely, and I appreciate
after
that
it,
feedback,
and hopefully you listen to what people say about it.
Yeah, and that's another thing about, we have the new Bourbon and BS podcast community page. And that's another way that you can actually interact with other people, other fans, other listeners, all that stuff, where you can give feedback back to us, where you can actually talk to other people about not only the cigars that we're smoking or the drinks that we're having, but you can share what you're drinking and smoking. And then also, like I said, you can actually give feedback to each other as well, which is what I love about it. We also have Nate Hale on tonight. Nate, welcome back.
Well, thank you.
Nate's usually behind the camera along with Dustin, but last week, this week, and we'll be talking a little bit about what transition we've got going on right now. But Nate is going to be helping out with the audio and everything else, and also with the conversation itself. We've got Dustin Bovey behind the camera. He also has a mic this evening, so he is going to be, if you're on the audio, you'll hear him, and even if you're on the video, you won't see him, but you will hear him as well. So we should have some good conversation, which I want to kind of take care of some business here. We want to kind of address what's going to be going on going forward. So it's kind of been a little bit quiet, but right now we're going through a transition on the actual podcast itself. Mic's out again. Put your back into it, Nate.
Good dramatic pause.
Yeah, right. If they heard any of that. So Jake Sanders, co-founder of the podcast, co-host of the podcast, has begun a new position. And so we've gone through, as some of you that have listened to us loyally, the reason that he was off the show for a few weeks back in the summer, late summer and everything like that, he was going through some transitions. He has landed now with Cigar Lounge in Indianapolis. So he started his training this week, helping set up the store. It's called Burn Lounge by Rocky Patel. So we are in the process of kind of figuring out what we're going to do. But as of now, we are going to have Jake on and involved when we can. But going forward, as of now, we are going to just keep doing what we've been doing, which is having guests on, talking about cigars, talking about whiskeys, and also life. So also always looking for guests. So we wish Jake the best of luck. Hopefully we'll have him on as often as we can have him a part of the podcast because he is a big part of this podcast, and we do not want to lose him altogether.
It's not goodbye. It's we'll see you soon.
That's sweet. That's sweet. That's exactly it. But so what do we for the audio? We've got the EPC Encore tonight. That's the majestic size. That is the cigar of the year, reigning cigar of the year right now. And for a cigar aficionado, that's right. You didn't realize that, Spencer. and we are drinking. I don't have it in my glass yet, but Spencer, what did you bring to offer tonight?
So I was at a OSU event a few weeks ago. It was Ohio State versus Nebraska, and they just happened to be. Some people were like, "Hey, do you like bourbon?" I was like, "I've had bourbon before. I enjoy bourbon." And this one guy said, "Have you ever had Old Pogue?" And I'm not as educated on bourbons as you all are, but I said I've never heard of that. And so he gave me a sip of it and said that tastes like bourbon. I enjoyed that. It's like, well, if you ever want me to get you some, let me know. Said, all right. Well, unbeknownst to me, about a month later, I get a text from my neighbor. He said, hey, buddy's buying a case of Old Pogue. They do not sell it by the bottle. You have to buy a case of it from the distillery, which is over in Maysville, Kentucky. And he bought a case of it, said, hey, I got an extra bottle. Would you like to try it? So bought a bottle off of him. Normally, if you were to buy this, it's about $110 a bottle. Got it for a little bit less than that. But the cool part about it is that they don't sell this in Ohio, right?
Correct. You can only get it either at the distillery or very limited places in Kentucky, Illinois, and New York. So you said your friend bought a case and had an extra bottle. How do you have an extra bottle of a case?
So he happens to know the family, and I guess this family is the 6th generation who actually is currently running the distillery. I guess Maysville is actually where Bourbon County, maybe where bourbon possibly started, is what the story is. And he just, you strike up conversations with somebody, and he said, hey, I got an extra bottle. This is their 12-year, so it's been aged for 12 years. And I said, yes, I'd like to try something I've never had. And I think the cool part about the bourbon community is that we all like to share stuff. So the reason why I bought it was not selfishly for myself, but was I wanted to give it to some people that have had, what have you guys had, 90-plus bottles on this?
Oh, it's well over 100 now.
Yeah. All right, you guys have a problem. But
episode 92,
passion.
but there have been some
passion.
episodes where we have featured multiple bottles. Like last week, we had 2 bottles because they were both Old Forester picks, so we were doing side-by-sides. So.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring you guys something that hopefully you had never had before. I'd never had, and at least just give it a try and see what you all think about it. But something a little unique, something a little rare that we can't just get at your local John Eagle.
No, and in fact, if I could, pour glass or...
Oh, we are out.
Fresh out. Fresh out, sorry. Small bottle.
Small bottle.
Oh, nice cork pop there.
What's everyone else drinking? I haven't seen anyone else answer that question.
For those listening in the car, what are you guys drinking tonight?
No.
Pull over.
Pull over. Look at the bottle. We don't want you reading while driving.
What flavor White Claw is your favorite on the drive back home?
But, officer, it's a prescription.
Yeah.
No, that's bourbon.
Yeah, I
get
like
the fuck
that
out of here.
going around. So we do have some people listening in from all over, so I want to kind of point that out again, pump up the Facebook Live thing. We've got Billy from Long Island, New York, checking in. We've got Mark Jeremias, who's a friend of ours, who is actually down in Cuba currently for the next few weeks. So he said, it's so hot here, can you please take off the stocking caps? And that's no, definitely not. It is freezing here, which is exactly the topic that we have tonight.
I got rid of the wig.
You got rid of the wig, which we all thank you for.
Was that your real hair back in the day?
Not what he had on him. No, that was a wig.
You are a natural blonde?
No, that was dyed.
That was college days.
That's
2
college.
questions. First, why?
I got bored after 6 months of growing out my hair in my junior year of college.
And how long did you keep it dyed?
So I had it for about probably 2 to 3 months. I got home, and the first day on the trucks for moving furniture that summer, I decided I cannot have a mop on my head while moving furniture in the summertime, and so I shaved it off again.
So I definitely did a lot of lemon juice, a lot of highlights in college.
So here's what
Here's
what you don't want to do. You would do with the highlights.
Spring
I like
break,
that.
a lot of lemon juice was involved.
Did I tell that story last week? What I did?
No. You didn't tell the story.
So, anyways, we had done. My brother actually started this. He's older than me, but it was something where he and his buddies use Frost and Tip, which is a highlighter stuff, which comes with a cap, so it's not going to touch your scalp, right? Like this.
Does
is a
it
highlighter.
come with a puka shell necklace in the?
It does not.
What about a hoop earring?
Yeah.
Gold earring.
My package happened to.
Yeah, I bet yours did. So the reason they turned out that bright is because we used basically highlighter, which is not supposed to touch the scalp, which I absolutely just put it on my entire head.
Is that the reason for your current situation?
So my brother and I talked about that I think that and genetics, but we don't know which. I did definitely burn. So what happens when you leave it on? It says, put it on for like 30 to 45 minutes.
Got to do an hour and a half.
Talk about an hour and a half. That's when you check the mirror, and then you go back to playing, I think it was Mario Kart at the time.
If it's not burning, it's not working.
Well, it stopped burning because, it's like, when you go like...
You burned all the nerve
you're like,
endings.
oh, I'm numb now. I can't feel anything anymore. That's what happened on my head. And my ex actually had helped me put it on and then went to class, came back about 3+ hours later, and it was still in my hair, and I got yelled at, and then it turned out great at the time. I liked it.
Did you?
At that point, it wasn't much option.
Yeah, I mean, did you re-dye it afterwards? Like, did you do
No,
it
I shaved it off.
You shaved it off.
Yeah, no.
Was that the last time
I can still feel like sensation on the top of my head.
Burning sensation?
It burns sometimes. I wake up at night crying sometimes,
Might
but
wanna
I
get
thought
that
it was
checked out.
unrelated until now we started talking about this.
I mean,
so
my
maybe,
rule of thumb is if it burns, you should check it out.
Is it? Is it? So yeah, the topic tonight is what happened to fall, is what I was trying to say.
Oh, is that where we were going?
That's where I was trying to go. The life topic tonight is what happened to fall. And here, as you can tell, if you're watching the video or if you're in the Midwest, it went from the long summer to a very abrupt change in weather. Today, in the Columbus area, outside the shop, I could actually see it go from a steady rain to it started sleeting to flat-out snow, all without stopping. So that's what happened to fall. And then, obviously, with the life topic, that can go in a lot of different metaphors or conversation points. So I'm looking forward to the conversation in the second half of the podcast. So,
But a month ago, we were having record highs in the mid-90s just a month ago.
yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that was the shortest fall ever.
It was short. So we basically just have summer and winter, I think, at this point. So
Welcome to Ohio, man.
welcome to Ohio.
Almost winter, still winter, and construction.
That's right. John Belly is down in Miami, actually. He's with Lazona Palooza. So all the guys and girls down at Lazona Palooza, if you guys do watch this, we do share it to the Lazona page. And Eric Espinosa was on the podcast not too long ago. Jason Williams says 88 here in Orlando. Go fuck yourself. And no, I'm just kidding. Thanks, Jason. But the guys down at Lazona Palooza, we're jealous. We hope you guys have a great time, and we hope you guys don't break the record of breaking chairs, which was, I think, 6 last year. They had 6 guys go down.
What is Lazona Palooza?
So Eric Espinosa, who was on the podcast recently, he does all the Espinosa products. He actually blends and produces the BS Silver for us. His factory in Nicaragua is called Lazona. And so Lazona Palooza is like an invite-only thing down at his, not at the factory, but at the warehouse down in Miami area. So they have a big party over the weekend, so that's this weekend. So it already is off to a good start, it looks like. So
University of Arizona recently changed their name from the U of A to U Arizona.
What?
Yeah, so I'm not making this up. So they're basically saying that that's just kind of like a stereotype for anybody in the state of Arizona. Like, you get drunk in a golf cart.
You Arizona.
You Arizona. That's exactly right.
That's it. That's good. No, it's good that the solidarity, of the state and the college. Good support there. So let's go over this Pogue Masters Select. Now, you mentioned, Spencer, that this was, when you were texting me, that it's like Pogue 12-year. Is that incorrect, or that was...
No, that is correct. So this one, they come out with basically one batch a year, from my understanding. And I tried the one from last year, which was aged differently. This one has been aged for 12 years. So 12 years aged. And I don't know, you gentlemen, tell me what you think. I know, Nate, you had tried one before. They do this bourbon, then they also do a rye, which I think the rye is about $65. I think this is...
This one retails for $110 if you can get it. Like I said, it's only available at the distillery or limited selections in Kentucky, Illinois, New York. So, we still, because I got an error, so making sure we're still going.
Dustin, we still good over there? Okay.
All right. Cool. But I had I had Pogue at a bar at the hotel in Chicago probably about 3 years ago. It's the only time I'd ever seen it. I think back then it was a lot cheaper than what this bottle is.
Illinois has a couple bourbons that you can't get over here, too.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
What's
they
the
do.
Brothers one? You might know what it is. Baum Brothers, maybe?
That one I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
I don't go to Illinois that much, but there is a fantastic
Ooh, that's nice.
bourbon and whiskey bar in Chicago called Untitled Supper Club. So they have a whiskey wall that is probably wider and taller than Steve's garage.
Easy, all right. This is a nice sized garage.
This is a nice sized
All right.
garage. I'm just trying to emphasize
Have
the
you seen
size.
bigger,
of their-
Spencer?
I have not seen bigger, Steve.
Thank you.
All right. But they actually have,
No, wash your hands, all right?
he's trying to keep warm. No, you ever see the movies with the libraries and they have the ladder on wheels? Yeah.
There's some cool wineries.
Yeah,
that
so
have that.
they have one of those at the
That's cool.
Untitled Supper Club. When you get their bourbon menu, it's the legal size paper, so 11-inch paper, and it's front and back, double column, 3 pages. That's just bourbon and rye. They have a separate menu for scotch.
Nice.
We can get a ladder in here if that's what's holding this place back.
I've got one. It's like the generic Little Giant.
I mean, we can put the bourbon on the top shelf if that helps.
It's not a good idea, especially later in the evenings.
Someone's going to fall off that ladder
Yeah,
reaching for a bottle.
absolutely.
Did you just have it straight, or did you have it with in a mixed drink of some sort?
I had it straight. Anytime I try a whiskey for the first time, I always try it straight up because that's what it is. That's what the whiskey is. If I think if I don't like the flavor that I'm getting, or I think it may be a little too hot, then I may add a cap of bottled water or something like that, because that can really change it. The biggest one I know of is that Angel's Envy rye. First time I ever had it, I didn't care for it, and then I put just a couple drops of water in it, and kind of like what you talk about, Steve, with that Willet 3-year rye. It's like Christmas and
Yeah, but
in a
that
bottle.
doesn't need the water on that one for me. But I know what you're talking about. In fact, I want to say something. We talk about Weller Special Reserve and how I don't care for that one. I have had several pours of that this last week or so, but put an ice cube in there.
Is it growing on you?
It's I'm not saying insultingly, but it's more tolerable, more enjoyable with the ice cube, and I don't get a hangover from it.
Do you not like it because it's more attainable?
No,
No, because it
that's not
feels
the
like
case.
shit the next day.
Yeah, I still think, and let's not focus on that. I think that one has a little bit more of that mineral taste and everything else, and then on top of that, normally I think in the past it's been towards the end of the night, so that might be part of it too. But I definitely have had hangovers way more than drinking that than I have with anything else. Not saying I drink all the time, but yeah, based on how much I drink, definitely I noticed that.
I know we're going to go into the Pogue here in a second.
I tried to do that like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on track. But my buddy, I had a drink with him the other day, and he's doing something at work where he joined a bourbon club at work. He gave me the. You guys
Like
ever
Fight
had?
Club?
Yeah, but you're not allowed to talk about it.
You're talking about it currently.
You just got
Switching
kicked
subjects. So he had the Jefferson's Ocean.
out. Yes.
Okay,
Love
so
that.
everybody says they do, right? So that's got the whole story of it's been on an ocean, it's been on a boat, the whole thing, and we can charge an extra $10 or $15 because we think it's been on an ocean, right? So his thing at work is that everyone picks a bottle a week. One person picks a bottle amongst 8 different guys and girls, and they pour it into a container where everyone can have a proper glass of it. They don't label it. They don't do anything with it. Everyone has their own separate one, and everyone goes home. They try it, and then the next week they discuss what they think it was and what their notes on of it. So they're trying it blind. And I would
like that, actually.
I would like to do that at some point, just because I think when you have perceptions of things, it definitely changes how you think of a whiskey before you even try it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting because there are several times. So Nate and I actually closed down the shop together on Saturday nights, and he's gotten more of in a practice of he'll bring bottles most of the time that we drink out of his just for a glass or two, and he started pouring me a drink. He's like, "You want a drink?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so he'll start pouring it and then putting the bottle away so that I don't see it. And it absolutely, like if I tried, that Weller Special Reserve without knowing it was that, again, one glass, it doesn't really bother me. It's just, having that as the bottle that we're sharing that night and we have more than one or two, that's where I think it really starts affecting me. And again, I think anything that I'm drinking, it's the third or fourth is easier to go down, clearly. But like I said, I had an ice cube or two in it this week, and I cared for it. It wasn't. I would say it wasn't bad. It was enjoyable.
Do you guys start drinking better stuff as the night goes on, just because you don't have the same?
We talked about that actually. That just happens. I think that's when Eric Espinosa was over here, and we started talking about that. Is that same thing with cigars? If you're hanging out and you're like starting to tie one on, you're like, you know what? Let me get you one of these cigars. You can't get it anywhere else. You never had it. Let me get it for you. It's not even trying to show off necessarily. It's
I would
just that
love to
you
go to a casino with you and just put it all in black.
Here's my ATM. Here's the pin.
$15, $1,000 on red.
We gotta go. Cool. Here's everything.
We're either staying or leaving.
Same. Yeah. No, it does. I know I'm one of those guys that will do that with bourbons too. Later in the evening.
Try some
if
stuff.
I've got something and I'm in that mode, then yeah, I'll do that. Less now, just because we're trying so many different whiskeys these days that I don't do it nearly as much.
I'm the other way around with cigars and with whiskey.
You put the good stuff away.
Well, not that I'm putting it away, but like when I'm smoking a cigar, like during the day, I'll smoke cigars that maybe I haven't had or ones that I really want to pay attention to. And by the end of Saturday night, after I've had 5 or 6, it's okay. We're, after hours, we're gonna have a couple drinks, smoke another cigar. Let me go grab something that I've had before, and I know I enjoy it. So that's when I typically go grab.
I get.
Yeah.
I'm saying, maybe I heard the question differently. Is that if we're hanging out at my house or whatever, if I have something, it's way too late in the evening. We're too far into a bottle, and I'm like, hey, you know what? We should try this.
I want people to, if I'm bringing out a special bottle, like one of my picks or something, I would want it to be on a fresh palate for that person.
Yeah.
And then afterwards we can go to, the Buffalo Trace or any of the ryes that I have or something like that.
You guys know your reality is not like real reality, right? Like if I have 5 or 6 cigars during the day, that is not. I don't know who your audience is.
All these people
I'm looking at the millions of people in the garage right now.
Millions of millions.
That is not real life.
We've got a couple cigar reps that are watching right now, and I used to have that role. And when you're traveling, driving a few 100 miles a day, or you're just driving from shop to shop to shop, you smoke a cigar when you get into the shop.
Yeah.
And then you leave, you go to the next one, you light up a cigar there, and you go to the next shop, light up another cigar there. So when I was on the road, I was averaging 5 to 7 cigars a day.
How?
Well,
you're constantly smoking.
Physically, how?
I can tell you how, because it's
How do you feel 8 a.m. the next morning?
I feel fine.
You light up another cigar and you go on the road again.
There's
trust
not
me,
like
you
a club for this or an anonymous, but this is
you can
crazy.
actually join the Bourbon and BS podcast community page. Thank you for bringing that up again.
Yeah, you can smoke a lot of cigars when you're driving from Columbus to Minneapolis.
I'm in a car 8 hours a day. If I had 2 cigars before a meeting, it would be a very different tone to the meeting. And maybe that's a good thing.
I like that. Let's get after it. And then call me before you go into the meeting and be like, all right, let's talk, let's go.
Make sure you eat first.
So back to the Pogue.
Yeah.
Please. Let's get that let's get it out on the table here. I've had a couple sips, very enjoyable. I actually really like what I've tasted so far. Spencer, you brought the bottle, you did a little bit of research. What are you thinking?
So I think it's 91 proof. Does that sound about right?
It should say on the bottle. I think it's
91 proof. That's right.
I mean, I'm not a expert, but that was a pretty good guess from looking at the bottle.
You
So-
guessed after looking at the bottle.
So here's where I'm at. When I tried it a few weeks ago, I tried last year's batch, and this year's batch I think is a little different. But what I really enjoy about this is, one, it's very smooth. It doesn't have very much heat at all to it. In honor of Jake, I'm going to go
who
with.
is tuned in? At least
Okay.
he was. So welcome, Jake, to the.
So
the
I'm
feed.
going to go with a fig. It has a little bit of fig in it. It's smooth. It's easy. I think it's a very enjoyable 91 proof bourbon. I'm not sure what I would compare it to. You guys probably have had more than I have to know what you can compare it to, but I think it's very unique, actually.
I think so. It is unique, but I will say also it's very enjoyable. Not much heat at all. I'm still getting it. I don't know if it's just the way my taste buds are recently or whatever my palate's doing, but I'm getting a little bit like that vanilla caramel, butterscotch type of a flavor, like real creamy.
Drink.
I definitely agree with the vanilla note. I get a little bit more of an oak note as well in there.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
But I think it tastes very light. It's very, very smooth. I don't get any heat.
Explain what you mean by light, because I think I know what you're saying, and for those that are listening that don't, necessarily try all the whiskeys, but, when you say light, what do you mean by that?
As in, this is not like, if we were to almost talk about like with the cigars, like this is not a full body whiskey. Like it's not something that has a whole lot of depth of flavor to it. I mean, you definitely get some flavors, but it's not a deep, complex, robust flavor. It's very bright.
I would like to make this
I can see that.
in a Manhattan, personally. I think this would go well as not a mixer, but in a Manhattan. I think this would make a very good Manhattan that could stand up to some stuff.
This, to be honest, it
I
kind of
think everything goes into Manhattan well.
Yes.
it actually kind of reminds me a little bit of an Irish whiskey.
Interesting, because I can see it a little bit. I think more of, when you say there's not much depth, I think there is depth to it. There's not a whole lot of that warmth, that spice. Like if that's what you're going for, like when you talk about richness, I think this is a very a well balanced and there's a lot of there's a lot of flavor.
It finishes
So
clean, though.
It does. There's not heat.
Well-
There's not the spice. There's not the warmth as far as that goes. I can see what you're saying about light, but I also think light sometimes when I'm having more like the floral, like the sweetness, then I don't get that as much with this. Maybe it's like right in the middle.
I think it goes well with the cigar as well.
Yeah.
It does. It does. It
You know,
really does.
I don't know enough about the cigar to tell you, but I mean, they seem to be at the same level of, richness, balance, medium bodied, light. Yeah, I think they both go well together.
I would agree with that. I mean, yeah, this medium-bodied cigar for sure. What were you going to say more about the whiskey there, Nate?
Well, I mean, I was almost going to compare it, like, if we were talking in the same nomenclature that we use with cigars, like, this might be, it's not something like, say, the Romeo San Andreas by that AJ made. Like, it's not
No.
that kind. It's more along the lines of like a Monte Cristo Classic or White Series. Like, there's definitely flavor there.
Definitely is like a
but
Monte
it's-
Cristo
The
White.
cigar?
No,
Or
the whiskey. The whiskey.
Okay.
It's a little bit more on the lighter side, but it does have the flavor. It's not something like I used to say in the old shop I used to work at. People would come in, ask for the Macanudo Gold Label, and I would sit there and say, "Yeah, you can buy that, or you can go suck on a McDonald's straw for an hour."
Very good customer service skills there you got there.
What type
But
of
there-
McDonald's
you don't
have
do
you
that
been to that?
No, just because it was so like that cigar. When I've smoked that cigar, it's so light. It's like smoking air. There's not a whole lot of flavor to it. This one at least does. I mean, so that's why I was saying it was kind of like a Monte Cristo Classic or White.
It's just tough
it's
love for a customer right
no,
there.
it's a milder whiskey, but there definitely is flavor to it. You're drinking a whiskey.
Dustin, you like it, man?
I do actually.
No.
I get a lot of notes.
Dustin, did you mess up your mic? Go again.
So I get a lot of notes, kind of like Steve was saying, that creaminess, the richness. I kind of blend it like a Werther's Original meets oak.
Yeah, I
So
said
that-
butterscotch.
Yeah, that kind of butterscotchiness, but I do get a little bit of that oak. Like you
I
were
should have
saying,
brought my
Nate.
Werthers in.
I had a feeling you would, but like you said, Spencer, it really does go well with the cigar. I don't know if it's the cigar causing it, but the whiskey literally coats every inch of my tongue, literally side to side and everywhere.
Yeah, I can see that.
Did you give away any Werther's Originals for Halloween, Dustin?
I plead the fifth.
No, I want to know
Of
the
Jack.
answer to this. No, I want to know the answer. There's no lawsuit.
If they're
so.
stuck together, it's one Werther's.
No,
for the
no, we
record.
went full on. It was Reese cups, Snickers, the good stuff.
If there's that's good. That's good. If there's two Werther's Originals stuck together,
It's one Werther's.
they have been in Grandpa's pocket way too long. Because that is the only people. That's the only. Come on.
I got
Which
some
I don't have a problem with that. I think it's great. I mean, those commercials were great when they were out. You know what I mean? It was nice seeing the grandkid, relating with the grandfather. Don't start crying. I
No,
see
no.
it in your
No, no.
eye,
Just
Spencer.
It's one
Don't-
tier. Just one tier.
No, I think you guys brought that up when Spencer
That may-
brought in the old granddad bottled in bond. He talked about an old bottle of old granddad that he had that tasted like a butterscotch,
That's gonna be a tearjerker tonight.
and it reminded him of a Werther's. And the next day, I was working at the shop, and I took a couple Werther's out of my desk, and I gave one to Ryan.
Why do you have Werther's in your desk?
He's an old man.
No, because I have a manager in my office that
Also
absolutely
an old man.
no, like
Okay.
a 35-year-old woman, but she loves
She
Werther's.
sounds handsome.
She loves Werther's, and so it's one of those like
Everyone loves Werther's, but it's like hard candy. They're not bad, I mean, you get them at like the dentist or the HR.
You'll never turn one down, but it's very rare that you buy them.
Very rare, yeah.
Weekly, bi-weekly,
no.
tops.
Well, like I had a bag in my desk, and this manager, before her current promotion, every once a week she was actually sitting at the desk next to me, and I would just sit there, pull a Werther's out, and offer it to her, and then she
Is this
bought
like part of an experiment?
no, but no, then she bought me a.
Pavlov's dog. I'd give her a Werther's, and then I'd say, hey,
spray her with
while
water.
you're up, you mind grabbing me a soda? Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the Werther's. And then you just stopped asking. You just gave her a Werther's, and all of a sudden there's a soda on your desk.
Spray with a
Fucking love
little
it. That's
white
amazing.
vinegar. And
That's
you know,
called
manipulation.
That's called conditioning.
Manipulation, whatever. Same
Yeah,
thing.
but no, so then that manager bought me a whole bag of Werther's, so there's another bag of Werther's in my desk, and when I gave that first one to Ryan, he absolutely loved it, and that's when you started showing those old Werther's commercials.
I feel like he needed to see that. What's happening right now?
I don't know.
And
if
you're
this-
sitting there
And you
going,
guys have
"Oh
been
yeah,
closer since, honestly. Since you handed him a Werther's original, you've been much closer.
I would
think.
bullshit."
I would kill for a Werther's right now. I don't know if that's just the conversation, but I'm craving.
What if-
one?
Yeah, take a sip
Dustin,
of that.
get in
see
the
if you
car.
Think Werther's. Think that golden wrapper. Just undoing itself. Is it good?
It doesn't taste like Werther's.
No, it doesn't taste like. Got a hint of it.
I enjoy the Pogue. I mean, hopefully you guys have liked it as well. It's just something a little different that's a little harder to get in the state of Ohio, which is why I wanted to bring it.
I think it's a good bottle. Now, do you guys think that what's the retail if you go there? 110 a bottle.
The way I view prices on bourbon, I think may or may not be different than other people. I was in Louisville a couple weeks ago, and a Eagle Rare, which is what, $30, something
32?
right? But if you have a shot of that, or you get a glass of that, they charge $12-15 for it. So the way I view bourbon is, it's not necessarily the quality which dictates the price; it's more the rarity of it. So a $30 bottle could taste just as good as a $200 bottle.
Yeah.
I think with this at 110, I'm being in Columbus, I'm not driving to Kentucky just to spend $110 and pick up this bottle.
Thinking 240,
No.
3.
However, if I'm going to Kentucky because I want to go to some other places, I'm on the Bourbon Trail and I'm getting some other bottles, and I come across this distillery and I have a chance, then maybe I pick it up. I wouldn't necessarily make a separate trip just for this bottle.
But you probably paid a fair amount to have this in Chicago, though, just to give it a try, just because it was something that you hadn't had before.
It was a
Probably.
$13 pour.
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
No, that was very, very cheap. That was actually cheaper than a pour of Willet Pot Still in Chicago, but the bartender actually gave me that for free. So,
wow, some heavy flirting going
Is that
on.
No.
Is that a humble brag?
no.
Do we call?
I think, that's not very humble.
No,
That's
we-
it's pretty pompous brag.
That's
Pompous
just a-
brag,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's call it pompous.
Yeah, just a
very
brag.
much so.
My team, we were going to Chicago about 4 or 5 times a year,
Yeah.
and the hotel I stay in has a bar,
Comfort in.
and not quite, and we would always go to the bar and have drinks, and we would always. It was the same 2 bartenders every time we were there at the hotel,
Yeah.
and we always made sure to take care of those guys.
Sure.
And in return, they took care of us.
No, I think that's great. Rich Back says, is that place freezing cold or something? Yeah, it's a little cold.
Look
Wow.
on a weather app,
You
and
see smoke when we're smoking and also our breath.
yes,
All right, so Pogue, you did a little research, a little bit further before we move on to the cigar, if you don't mind, because I think that's part of the whole thing is that you told us where it's at and all that stuff, and I think you said 6th generation.
Yeah, so I'll just read a quick little story of it, not the entire history, but Old Pogue has a history dating back to the years following the Civil War. In 1876,
I do remember reading that.
the original Pogue Distillery, Kentucky registered distillery number 3, was established in Maysville, Mason County, Kentucky, very near a site said to be the location of Kentucky's first bourbon distillery. Today, the bourbon making tradition is carried forward by the 5th and 6th generation Pogues, using the original Pogue recipes under a time-honored and fixed formula. Our current base of operation is located in the very same plot of land in Maysville, and they are proud to offer superior quality, small batch bourbons, and rye spirits. The only
That's
other
really
thing
nice.
I really like about these guys is that they list all the recipes for all the types of bourbon drinks, which
Like the mash bills, or
no,
what are you
they
talking about?
like how to make a true mint julep, how to make
Oh,
a true
so using
Manhattan,
as a
how to make a
cocktail
bourbon
thing.
slushy, things like that. Which I'm sure everyone has their own version of, but I really enjoy a bourbon slushy, and I don't think we do enough of those in Ohio.
That's bourbon and ice, right?
And possibly some Sprite, and possibly
Really?
some like orange
Would
juice,
you
stuff
do
like
that with a $110 bottle?
Oh yeah, have you
For
tried
sure.
it with Pappy?
I have not. There was a bar though I heard about that was doing like the shots and stuff with that.
Oh yeah, they're called liars.
I don't know.
If I remember from the website, they do this and a rye, and that's it, right?
That's it.
Wow. So they
Small operation.
Yeah, I don't know how big or small this place is, but if I think it's just more of a pride of the family. They've been doing it for years. They clearly have a following, but I don't know if there's 100 places like this. I don't know if there's 10 places like this.
Yeah.
But in Kentucky, they seem to be popping up everywhere.
yeah.
Kentucky, yeah, it's a huge growth in the last several years in distilleries in general, but this one's been around for a long time.
Been around for a long time.
Yeah, so that's neat. Once again, I enjoy the whiskey. I think it's definitely worth a try. I think I wouldn't keep seeking it out. You know what I mean? For the price.
Let me ask you guys a question,
Personally.
just because you guys have done 92 of these episodes.
This is you're currently on episode 92, yeah.
Okay. So when you try something new,
Mm-hmm.
how do you actually go about doing it? Are you swishing around in your mouth? Are you going for the
No.
nose? Are you just drinking it?
I smell it, and then I drink it like I normally would.
Has your palate gotten better or worse? Are you more spoiled because you've had so many?
I don't know I don't think I have the greatest palate for whiskeys or cigars.
I don't think you give it an honest try.
Well, I think I do. Honest, I do. I try it the same way though. I look at the whiskey. I do all the stuff that like you look at the color, you look at the legs, you look at the you smell it, you try the nose, you try all that stuff, and then you take a sip of it. Now I will say that with doing this podcast, what we don't do enough is on a completely, at least me, I don't do a completely fresh palate. So I don't before I did that. Like we had a drink or two before the podcast, and I also had several cigars during the day. So I didn't do maybe that's something we can actually seek out, is doing something like a palate cleanser.
Like an 8 a.m. podcast.
I make it 6
a.m.?
6 a.m.
With a pre-workout?
Well, yeah.
No, we just get in touch with Eric Espinosa's guy and get a baggie of the citric acid.
Exactly. Do a little bump before.
That's right.
What does he do?
That's like it's a citric acid or citric like powder, and that's the way that they use. Like it's like a palate cleanser. It like shocks your palate.
Really?
Yeah. Instead of like doing like chocolates or any of that stuff, they did that when we were doing the BS Silver blending. Is in between blends that we were trying, you would actually just literally like put your like pinky or something in there, put it on your tongue, and it would absolutely shock your palate.
Back to normalcy, or did you have the taste of the citric acid in it?
So it's to a point where it would, you tasted what you like the powder or whatever, but then you weren't tasting the cigar or anything else with it.
We should definitely get that.
Yeah. He tried to give us a bag of it as we were leaving.
That's cocaine, Steve.
In Miami.
That is 100% cacao.
I should have kept it.
No. You can't travel with that, Steve.
Yeah, well, in Miami, I've told the story before, but it ended up in a trash can outside the elevator, and I'm
That
pretty sure
is
someone
100% cocaine.
whoever picked it up though and tried it was
That
probably
is a
upset.
stripper in Miami who was extremely disappointed of the way her night ended up.
Escort.
Yeah.
I'm
She's a dancer.
Do we know the mash bill on this at all?
I do not.
I do not.
Because I'm going to guess just by the flavor of it, it's at least 70% corn. I think it's got a really high corn content to it, like 70 to 75.
75-ish.
That's what you're thinking, Dustin? 75. So 70.
Stupid question. What's the other 25?
That's where you're going to have your barley, your rye, your wheat.
I mean, do people care what the other 25 is?
Some people do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you obviously are an aficionado. How do you try the different whiskeys that you have on the podcast?
Well, like I said earlier, the first thing I do is I try it straight up, just neat, and have a couple sips. Actually, move it around a little bit, almost chew it, and then go from there. Have a couple more sips. If I think it's something that's got too much heat to it, to where that heat flavor, or that spice kind of overpowers the palate a little bit, that's when, because now bottles of water have those real thin, short caps on them.
Yeah.
So just, a cap of that, drop it in, and then try it again, mix it around, and see if I notice anything different.
Sure.
I'm not just then trying it like, okay, this is what it tastes like. I'm like, okay, is there any difference between trying it this way versus trying it neat?
Yeah, I mean that's different stuff. Especially look at me. But I mean, what do you think? How do you normally you try whiskeys, not on the podcast, but I mean you've had several different whiskeys.
I like to try stuff that I haven't had before,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I can kind of compare it. And I'm still trying to figure out what things I like. Similar to you, I try to ask the bartender's opinion. Whenever I'm at a bar or restaurant, one thing that I've picked up from friends and just in general, and being in the service industry, first thing I ever do is I always ask for the person's name. Whether I'm at a bar, restaurant, what's your name? Yeah, and I'm Spencer.
That's people skills.
People skills, right? So I'm learning from last week's. But I always do that, and if I can have that interaction with them, I say, well, why don't you tell me what you've enjoyed and things like that? And, you guys were talking about, was it the Willet 3-year?
Yeah, that's the Willet 3-year rye that's no longer produced.
So when I was in Louisville maybe about a month ago or so, basically they have anything that you can possibly imagine. I was at the Brown Hotel in downtown Louisville.
There you go.
And the bartender was like, try this Willet 4-year rye.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but once you try something along those lines, my memory's not good enough to know why, but I knew that I liked that better than anything else I've ever had.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the Willet 3-year, which the 4-year replaced it, is how that happened.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the new, if you will, normally produced base rye, I think, from Willet.
Yeah, but I like to try crazy different stuff. I remember, maybe like a year ago, we had something, was it Burning Chair?
Burning Chair.
Burning Chair, yeah.
So that's one that I remember, because it was was it in like a wine barrel or something like that?
I believe you're right, yeah.
Yeah, and stuff like that. Like I look at the bottle, I'm like, I would buy that bottle because it's a very cool bottle. But once I actually try it, I'm like, all right, that one might not be for me.
It was a miss.
It was
you.
a miss, but once you told the background story as how it was made, how it was produced, then I had some greater appreciation for it.
Right.
But different people have given me different advice as to how to try bourbon. Some people chew it. Some people want it all over their gums, all over their teeth. Dustin said he wants it all over his tongue, which he looked me directly in the eye when he said that. But
is that when
he
you
had
grabbed my
he had
leg?
an eyebrow raised when he.
Yeah, so I just enjoy trying different stuff, and there's so many good bourbons out there that I think I like to give them all the right opportunity. I mean, what was that 100% rye that we tried earlier tonight?
That was the Canadian Club 100% rye, and it's 100% rye. It's 80 proof. Here in the state of Ohio, you can get it at a last call store for $10.
So that was just something I've never even tried before, would never even pick up. But I'm glad that I at least can be like, oh, I know what that is. Yeah. And that's kind of my goal with some cigars and some of the bourbons, is to have a point of reference as to, okay, I know what Pogue is.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you were generous enough to try, what was the Pappy that we had earlier this evening?
You had a bit of what Eric Espinosa brought on the podcast, which was Old Rip Van Winkle 10-year.
Yeah, and just to be able to try it, just so I can be like, oh, I tried that.
Yeah,
not for bragging rights, but at least to have a point of reference. I really enjoy stuff like that.
Yeah. And so there's no right way to do it. I think that's the message, I think, for everyone out there. Same thing with cigars, but with whiskeys, I kind of look at it as, yes, you can do the review and do the technique of what you're talking about as far as, swishing around, chewing it, as Nate calls it, and I've heard that term before. But I think it's how do you drink it? I guess diagnosing it is part of the fun for some people. I'm more of a practical type of a person about that. Same thing with cigars, is I want to make sure you're enjoying it.
Is there a
it's like going through the
bourbon
process, it's
app?
fun.
Like some people have a beer app, some people have a wine app.
There's a cigar app. I don't know if there's a bourbon app.
So that's the $1 million idea right there. That will make tens of dollars. But just a way to, all right, I tried this bourbon. I can knock this one off the list, and these are my thoughts on
It's called
that
Excel.
bourbon.
Microsoft makes it.
Microsoft, one more time?
Excel. It's
New?
EX. There might be a new version. It's called a spreadsheet. Here's a pen. Write it down.
Here's a pen and paper. Go figure it out on your own.
I think, like I said, I think there's a lot of fun that goes into it, and there's a lot of enjoyment for some people that are doing all that stuff, and I love that because I do like to read some of the reviews. I think some of them get a little overboard, but again, maybe I'm not tasting it, what they're tasting, but it does help. And the way they're doing it, they have a technique that they are hopefully just like any other scientific experiment. They have a formula or a technique that they do the same thing on every one of them. Mine is smelling it, trying to think about that, and then also sipping on it. Maybe I hold it in my mouth a little bit longer when I'm first trying it, and then try to get the finish once I swallow, all that stuff. But it's more of, for me, it's more of just at what I would normally like drinking this. Do I like the flavor of this? Does it change as I have it, get down in this first glass? I think it has changed a little bit, but again, I think that it's from the first sip to the last sip type of a thing for me.
Walk me through. So I took an Uber over here, and I told the gentleman what I was doing, driving over to another man's house at 6:30, 6:45.
Your normal driver?
Normal driver. And he was like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting into cigars. I was like, you definitely should. Have you heard of the Tinder Box in Easton? It's like, yeah, I've heard of it. I go, well, they can kind of guide you.
Yeah.
But when you are trying a new person, when you are trying a cigar, and for them to figure out their palate on a cigar, how would you tell them to, besides smoking the entire thing and seeing if they liked it or not, what type of notes, how would you tell them, if they can't retrohale, what they should look for?
So I'm going to actually, and we'll get into the cigar now. I think it's a good segue, so I appreciate that. But I would say, what I normally say is I ask them if they know. So mild, medium, or full body is a good way to start, what they think they enjoy. I think you actually hit it on the head. What you do a lot of the times with the whiskeys is you need to smoke not everything, but you need to try multiple things. Don't just smoke mild stuff because someone tells you that's what you smoke a lot. No, it's like, I only smoke occasionally, or this is, I just got into it. Well, let's stick with mild. I think that's kind of a bullshit attitude because I think it's something that you don't know what they like and they don't know what they like. So the only way you figure that out is if you you try these things. And the same thing with the whiskeys, like you're doing. You try to get your bearings, because you don't know what you like, and that's anything in life. Is that you have to try multiple things to figure out what you're actually enjoying. Because if not, you sell yourself short, and you stick with that. You stick with smoking mild cigars, or if you're like, I like full range stuff. Then you go to the full body stuff, and that's all you smoke. And someone says, "Hey, have you tried this one? It looks pretty light on the wrapper," or is that milder? Yeah, it's a milder cigar. I don't like mild cigars.
Does the color of the wrapper actually affect whether it's mild or full bodied?
It can. I mean, because it's part of the cigar, but it's not the rule of thumb is that the lighter the wrapper leaf, it's going to be a milder cigar. That's not the case. A lot of the strength actually comes from the filler, and we've talked about that before on some of these episodes. So it's absolutely good review. I think it's. A lot of the strength actually comes from the filler, because there's a lot more of that than anything else, and that's where you're putting in the different levels of tobacco. So you're going to have, some of the top leaves on the plant are going to carry more strength, no matter what tobacco it is, but it's going to have more strength to it. So that's where people get confused with that. Now, what I will say is that I think a lot of times when you have a lighter wrapper leaf, depending on where it's from and what it is and all that stuff, it may blend better.
They try to lead people that way by it. Like,
no,
hey, if we put a lighter wrapper,
a lot of the Connecticut shade or the shade grown stuff, I think it does blend better with the like milder to medium tobacco, as opposed to doing a shade grown, like real light shade, lighter cigar wrapper leaf on real full body stuff. I don't think, for me, I would guess that it doesn't actually blend well.
Get lost in the mix.
It gets lost in the mix. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of a marketing side of it.
Well, and that's kind of a misconception that's been around for decades, and we still get it today in the shop. People think, if it's a dark cigar, it's a strong cigar, it's a full body cigar. And I've had times where same manufacturer, they have this cigar in a natural shade, and then they have this cigar in a Maduro. And literally, there's nothing different about the cigar. It's the same filler combination. It's the same binder. And it's actually the same wrapper. What they're doing for that Maduro is they're aging it longer or fermenting it longer, which is what's giving it the darker color. It's giving it more, because of the oils and sugars, it's giving it almost a little sweeter taste to it.
Right.
But it's the same cigar. So I can sit there and point, these two cigars sitting side by side. Which one do you think stronger? Well, they're actually kind of the same. This one's actually got more flavor to it. It's a richer cigar. Or you take something. I had one the other day. I was like, which do you think is stronger? This Onyx, which is a Connecticut broadleaf Maduro, or this Opus X? And Opus is actually typically a stronger.
It's in a
cigar.
stronger house. Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's a full body cigar, but it is. But then again, you look at something like what I mentioned earlier, the Romeo San Andreas. That is a dark cigar. That is a full body cigar.
It is, yeah.
That's a powerhouse of a cigar. But just because it's dark doesn't mean it's strong.
Do your guys, because you smoke so many cigars, have your guys' palates be like, hey, I can't have the milds? Or
no, I think that you find what you prefer. So, for me, you're kind of all over. I'm all over the board. I enjoy some mild cigars. I enjoy some full body cigars. I enjoy some, Nicaraguan puros. I enjoy some Dominican puros. All that stuff. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to rule out what you think you don't like. And that goes with brands as well. Because there's a lot of people that, same thing with distilleries. When they know it's made at a certain place, they either say, oh, I'm going to like that, and they buy it, or they're like, oh, I'm not going to like that, and they never buy it, and they never try it. So I think that there's a lot of variety out there that you can't just go off of. Now, you can if you're, working on a budget. You may say, you know what, I don't want to spend that $10 on that cigar because I've had bad experiences with this brand, or it's all Dominican tobacco, or it's considered a milder cigar. And today I'm going to be spending $10, $15, whatever it is, and I'm going to be buying a fuller-bodied Nicaraguan cigar because typically over the last whatever period of time, I know I've enjoyed that. So that's my better choice tonight.
Fair enough.
I like starting my Saturdays at the shop. I'll go to Fido, get a cup of Jennings Java coffee, come back, and then typically I'll smoke either a Monte Cristo White or a CLE Chile.
You are a classy mofo.
It's a classy broad. He is a classy
Because
broad.
those two cigars I love having in the morning, start the day, and I love having them with a cup of coffee. That's
nice.
And they're both Ecuadorian Connecticut's. They just have different filler regions.
Dustin, you have something there?
I was just gonna say, just for me at least, it depends on what I'm in the mood for. Sometimes, especially in the summertime, lighter cigars, but sometimes I go towards a fuller cigar. Depends on what I've had to eat that day or what I'm drinking with it.
You ever eat with your meal? Not eat with a meal. You ever have a cigar with your meal?
I do eat with a meal.
I'll take care of the comedy.
It's a good start. Actually, no. I'll set the cigar down, and then come back to it after I'm finished eating.
Yeah.
And I'll rinse the palate out, with water or something, or whiskey, and then go back to the cigar.
I usually try and wait until after I eat to smoke the cigar because I don't want to sit it down because I don't want to have to relight it. But after I eat, that's when I'll maybe go to something a little stronger, is after I've eaten something.
When you guys have those prime rib dinners, are people having cigars and eating their prime rib?
Now, typically what you're going to do is you're going to smoke before and after the meal. You're not going to typically keep going back to it between bites, in my opinion. But I do want to get to this cigar, though. I like the conversation, but I do want to kind of give credit to this one's provided by Tinder Box at Easton, one of our sponsors, and it's the Ernesto Perez Carrillo Encore, and it's called EPC Encore for short. Ernesto Perez Carrillo actually has been in the business for a long time. His family's been a part of it. It was originally called the El Credito Factory, and something that he actually took over when his father was going to be basically getting rid of the business. And he was not really into it, but then he rethought it, according to the stories that I've heard, and kind of took it over and really got into it. And then I had some success with La Gloria Cubana. If you've heard of La Gloria Cubana, that's a brand that he had. In fact, those cigar boxes still say EPC on them, even though once it had some success, he had an offer, from my understanding, that was too good to pass up from General Cigars, and ended up selling that brand to General Cigars, who still sells it to this day. And again, the boxes still have his initials on it. So, and now they have in the General factories, I forget which factory it is, but they have kind of a section of one of the factories that's called El Credito. So it definitely pays tribute to the Carrillo family. Now, Ernesto's back in the last several years. His family's involved. His daughter's very involved, Lisette. This one is what's called Encore because he had a lot of success with the La Historia, which I can't remember if we've had on the podcast or not, but that is certainly one of my favorites from Ernesto. And Ernesto also blends and makes for other brands too. So he is
like
is
the
very
bourbon
active.
world, or what does that mean?
What do you mean?
Like, what's a company out of Indiana that?
Oh, MGP?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he has his own brand, but he also does, I mean, he can be sourced, much like, we do as an example for people that follow the podcast, or local, like the BS Cigar Company. We don't have our factory. We don't have our fields. We don't buy the tobacco. We source it through Eric Espinosa. So it's a lot of that. We don't just, necessarily buy a blend, but we actually blend with them. And Ernesto works with a lot of them. I know right now we've had Alec Rubin, which is Alan Rubin's son, who's part of Alec Bradley, and Alan owns Alec Bradley, but Alec and Bradley, the two sons, are working with Ernesto on their current blend. So the Gatekeeper, I think, is part of that. They worked with Ernesto Perez Carrillo. So he's had a lot of success. The La Historia had a lot of notice. He's got a full line of cigars. This Encore, currently, like I said earlier, is the reigning champ on the Cigar Aficionado top 25. For this year that's
this
ending.
Size as well.
This size we're doing is called the Majestic. It's like a Robusto, a Nicaraguan Puro. It's something that he's done that before with Nicaraguan Puro, but it is definitely, I think, a little different for him. It's more of a medium-bodied cigar. I'll let you guys kind of talk about that. There is a fact of this that I kind of wanted to point out too, is that, and I can't find it, and I haven't had a chance to talk with anyone from Carrillo. So we have a rep, Peter Worth, which I'm going to ask him next time. But they talk about this kind of distinct technique of fermenting the tobacco that's used in the cigar. I don't know if it's the wrapper, the filler, or whatever, but they actually use palm leaves and rope to basically tie that in, and they're calling it the tercios. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there is a Spanish term for that.
Tercios.
Oh, thank you. But I want to ask you guys what you think of this cigar before we move on to the life topic. I mean, we talk about bourbon a lot, but I think this is something that this cigar is definitely worth talking about.
So when you asked me kind of what I was interested in, the one thing, and I know you guys don't care as much about, whether it's box press or not, but I prefer a box press, which
that was your request tonight.
That was my request. So this I do appreciate, but I enjoy wine as well, and those things get rated, and I'm sure cigars, I know cigars get rated as well. But for me, this is a mild, consistent cigar that's obviously rolled very well, but there is nothing about this cigar that makes me think that this is the cigar of the year. There's nothing memorable to me personally about it. I could have this, and I think it would be consistent, kind of like how I enjoy Woodford, and Woodford, I know what I'm getting every time.
Yeah.
But I am pleasantly surprised that this stood out, and I'm not sure how the judging works on stuff like that.
Sure.
But I'm curious as to how they rate cigar of the years.
So they have the same rating as far as the different categories, and each of the categories, construction, I'm sure flavor, all this stuff that goes into it. And I don't know aficionados breakdown, but it all adds up to 100. So when you get like a 94 or 95, that is based on.
So is this like a 94 or 95?
I think it was a 95.
Are there a lot of 95s?
There's not. I mean, again, it depends on what publication. Aficionado's been around the longest, to my knowledge, as far as mainstream, and I think that's something that a lot of people look at, especially the more occasional smokers or people that really do enjoy their publication.
I mean, are people going to the Tinder Box and asking for this cigar?
Typically with a cigar of the year, you're going to have that where people do seek it out. Now, I will say it's interesting because previous years, recently, there's been more limited production cigars that got the top rating.
A little bit more rare.
The 2 years before
Definitely.
this.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you had the Fuente Eye of the Shark before this.
Correct, yeah.
And then before this, before that, you had the LFD Andalusian
Bull,
Bull, which were both slated to be limited production cigars.
And they still are.
Before they got the number one.
So what does this cigar cost before the rating and after the rating?
It's remained consistent. And a lot of people...
That's impressive.
That's the industry. Most of the time, you're not going to see a huge price increase. You see it in the bourbon world. Once they get the awards, they're getting more. Depending on what state you're in, you're going to get that where it's going to be going up. Henry McKenna was one recently that I think we either featured on the podcast or we had it before when we were just doing Whiskey Wednesdays. But that one definitely has increased dramatically since it won awards and gained popularity.
It used to be
in the state of Ohio. I don't know about everywhere else.
It used to be $31, $32 a bottle. Now it's $50.
So what's this? Jeez, wow.
Yeah.
So what's this cigar cost?
This cigar in this size is $12.95
Yeah, I
at the
think
Tinder
suggested
Box.
retail is about $11.95.
Okay.
Across the board, across the states. So it's interesting you say that because this one has not moved as well as previous years, and that could be either the cigar or the weight that people put on this list.
So it's a beautiful
There's
cigar.
two sides of
It's like I said, it's very consistent, but there's, in my mind, there's nothing memorable about it.
Nate?
So, I mean, I first smoked this cigar last year, and I smoked it when it. You guys need a moment?
Maybe.
Okay. Dustin, you want to fill in?
For who? Which?
You. So I first smoked this cigar last year when it first came out, and I think when they first rolled it, there was the ones I had the first time were a little soft. The cigar smoked and almost felt to the touch like it was missing tobacco from the filler. Like they forgot to.
This one does?
When it first came out,
okay.
It just smoked. It smoked very, very quickly and was very spongy. Like they forgot to put a leaf or two in. They have since fixed that issue.
I was going to say, I made some calls and it should be better.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer.
Spencer.
Yeah. So Ernesto has you to thank for that number one rating. But no, I was kind of surprised as well because, like you said, I find it to be a little bit more of a medium body
versus what is this considered?
It is considered medium. It's considered medium body.
Yeah. I think it's got some nice earthiness, some nut flavors, which I know Steve's allergic to nuts, so Steve doesn't know what nuttiness on a cigar tastes like. Something you might know, Spencer, I think it would pair well with that Woodford malt that you brought to the podcast one time.
Oh, everything pairs well with that, buddy.
That was a good
hot
one.
button.
I brought that to the podcast too one time.
I'm glad that people like it because it was more of a donation. You know, Woodford happens to be my go-to, so I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed it more. But when I first tasted it, I was expecting Woodford, and that did not taste like Woodford at all.
No.
No.
But I definitely get what you're saying with, this cigar is just not memorable. You know, you get some flavor there. It's like I said, I don't find it to be a mild smoke. I do get some flavor. There's just a little bit of body to it, but there's nothing that stands out. There's no flavor that stands out. It's not a very robust, full cigar, as especially compared to some of the cigars that have been number one in the past. Definitely compared to the La Historia.
So
I think the La Historia is full.
It was in the top 3, I know. I think it was number two. Yeah.
It was number 2, and that's why this was called the Encore, because it was a follow-up to the La Historia. I think this was blended by Jose Blanco, who works with Ernesto now.
So we talked a bit about how you taste bourbons. When you are a newbie to cigars or just in general don't smoke 5 to 6 a day, how would you suggest somebody try a cigar, and what are they supposed to look for besides the construction that it doesn't fall apart on you?
Well, I think the flavor, when you're talking about the flavors that you get out of a cigar, that's just going to come with time. That's just going to come with developing your palate. No one's going to start out smoking cigars and going, on this one I get, I get some almond, I get some chocolate, I get some pistachio, I get vanilla or, saffron. I remember seeing that one, or marzipan, almond paste.
You love almond paste, Steve, if I recall.
I don't know what the difference between almond paste and almond flavor is, except for the paste texture, which is you're not going to get.
More pasty.
I think starting out, if you're starting out smoking cigars, find cigars that you enjoy the flavor. You may not know why you enjoy the flavor, but start out by smoking cigars that you enjoy the flavor, and then as you smoke them and as you develop your palate, then see if you can pick out some of those flavors. Then try and retrohale, or then expand your palate and try other cigars that are outside your wheelhouse.
So let's just say you've had a cigar in the past that has fallen apart on you. Do you think that's a one-off, or do you think that's a trait of that particular cigar?
I will smoke any cigar at least twice. So, and the reason I say that, if I smoke a cigar the first time and it tastes absolutely horrible, which I've had that happen. I've had cigars where I haven't even been able to smoke more than half an inch of and had to throw it away because it just tasted so bad. But I'll, later on down the road, I'll go back to it to see if maybe that one was a fluke, maybe it wasn't stored properly, maybe it was just a bad roll, something like that. Because
I think that's exactly what it is. This is it's a hand rolled product.
There's going to be variation. There's going to be flaws to it.
I want to chime in here. I think that with your what do you like? You know what I mean? Like, again, are you diagnosing? Is that the hobby that you like, or do you like smoking a cigar with friends? Do you like smoking a cigar by yourself? If you want to diagnose it for the flavors, just like bourbon, cigars are the same way. So when you ask, and I like you asked that a lot, Spencer, it's like, what are you looking for? Construction is a big part of it. You know what I mean? If you have one bad one, you can try something else. But if you are trying different stuff, then I think that you should give it at least 2 tries. Because I agree with Nate that when I first had this cigar, the construction was not on par, which is interesting because the story behind it is that it originally got introduced in 2016, and then Ernesto pulled it back and said it's not ready. He wasn't happy with it. He wasn't happy with the way it was smoking. He wasn't happy with the tobacco. So he actually sat on these things, or sat on the tobacco, sat on the blend, said, I'm not ready to put it out on the market. And I had more wrapper issues. The wrapper on this cigar is I feel very thin and I had some breaking wrappers around it. So that's where I didn't care for the construction of it. Flavor wise, I think it's a very good cigar. You guys keep saying not memorable. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So again, what are they in? Like, there's the passion behind it as far as like trying to make something unique. But when it comes down to it, there's only so much tobacco out there, and there's so many different cigar blends. So yeah, you can do some of the more unique vitolas or shapes. You can do the different, age on the tobacco, and with that comes with the cost of doing that. But I think if you've got a cigar of the year, the way I look at it is that based on those different scales, even if there's one that's like a 10-point scale that is, uniqueness or whatever it is, even if you have 9s or 10s on every other category and the uniqueness scores a 4 or 5, that's a great cigar. Because I think that's something that you're in the business to sell cigars. I don't care if you want to talk about the passion or like, I think that's all very, very valid, and I agree with all of it. And I think I have a decent level of passion for both the whiskey and the cigars. But when it comes down to it, is it going to sell? Do people want to drink it? Like, you know what I mean? You can geek out on this stuff all you want, but when it comes down to it, smoke the cigar, learn the story if you want to, and learn what's in it, like as far as the tobacco. But the bottom line thing is, what are you looking for is, do you enjoy smoking this cigar? Do you enjoy drinking this bourbon?
So I enjoy smoking the cigar.
Yeah.
It's lasted pretty much almost an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I'm bringing up the construction, things like that, so there was a brand, and forgive me if there's your sponsor, but I don't believe that they are. But do you guys sell much Gurkhas?
We sell some.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back in the day, Gurkha probably had one of the most beautiful labels of cigars I've had, and I really enjoyed the flavor. But there was a handful that I would enjoy the flavor, and then all of a sudden they'd fall apart on me.
Right.
So my question, I guess, is that a trait of the cigar manufacturer, or is that just a bad batch in general?
It can be both.
It could be both.
So if you remember when we had a Gurkha event, I think it was earlier this year, Steve, or was it?
Yeah, it was last year, yeah.
Late last year
Yeah.
we had. So one of the interesting things about Gurkha that you may not know, Spencer, is sometimes Gurkha will actually sell off the naming rights to a cigar. So they will actually sell the name of a cigar to another company who will make that cigar, use the Gurkha name, but Gurkha's not making it.
It's more online stuff.
So
More online stuff, honestly. It's not the brick and mortar stuff. They do most of their brick and mortar stuff.
Yeah.
But not all their online stuff.
And so that, because that was happening so much, that started to hurt the reputation of the name, of the brand Gurkha, because people thought that this crappy Gurkha cigar was being made by Gurkha, but it wasn't. So they're trying to take more of that ownership back a little bit to try and get more of their name, solidified as to the way it used to be.
I will tell you, I do get some more flavor on this particular cigar as it kind of gets down a little bit.
It builds nicely.
It does build. It does build. And when you were asking about, do people come in specifically looking for the number one or looking for this, every year, for at least a month or so after the ratings come out and they name, the top 25 cigars of the year, there will be people that come into the shop with either the magazine or the little fold out that sometimes they'll get, or they'll print it off or write it down. They'll have the top 25 cigars written down, and they'll come into the shop and go, "Hey, which of these do you have? I want to get all the ones that you have that are on this list."
If you go to a wine shop, they typically have the rating next to the wine. Do you guys do that with the cigars?
We don't have any
No,
shelf
so,
talkers.
Yeah, they call that shelf talkers, where you underneath the box. So a lot of the humidors have boxes, walk-in humidors, and a lot of the companies will actually have it in the box somewhere. Once they get that rating, the next batch or whatever, they'll put a sticker in there. They'll put a fold-out thing like you're talking about. Other people that have them on shelves like we do, they'll have shelf talkers, which basically they're not wedged, but there's like a fold down type of a thing with the information, the ratings, and all that stuff. And they live and die by that. I mean, that'll be on this, they'll have it as a part of the marketing forever until they stop producing the cigar. This was the 2018 Cigar of the Year, the Aficionado, with the rate. Which it's good business, you know what I mean? It's something that you need to do. Like the bourbon's the same way when they have the little lanyards on it or whatever, where it says, the silver medal, gold medal, whatever it is, whatever accolades they got.
scored
that
this
they wanna
many
do that.
Pabst Blue Ribbon.
They got a blue ribbon. They put it in the name.
So in a box cut, so I like how it feels in my hand, but is there a difference in flavor between a box cut and something else?
It can be, and that's typically because they do have to tweak the blend a bit to get that shape versus a round. But there are a lot of cigars that'll come out like this one did, and there are no round versions of this blend. They're all box pressed.
That's what I like about the Medulla Oblongata from CLE.
Waterboy.
Is that's right. The Medulla,
Sean's smoking.
the Medulla is the round version. The Oblongata is the box pressed.
Right.
But whether it's the original Corojo or the Maduro, it's both the round and box pressed. They're the same blend,
Interesting.
but different sizes. So it's all preference at that point.
It's a likelihood.
Saving for Facebook.
Go ahead and pee.
Do we have time?
Go ahead.
All right.
So, yeah, this is the time of the program. For those of you watching the live here, we're going to, oh, boy, where Spencer knocks some things. No, they saw it already.
He bought it, so.
They're the only ones. Yeah,
Dustin, you may have to give up your mic.
All right, no, check his mic when he comes back. But, we appreciate all the feedback out here. What do you guys have out there that you guys are drinking? See a lot of good conversation here, which I appreciate. Rich Backs, I appreciate you coming through and checking us out. Rich, where are you from? I'm looking at this feed here to try to figure it out. But he hasn't said yet, I don't think, unless he was the one from New York. I don't think he was. I think that was a Billy. But we appreciate you. I know I got Ray Cheshire on here tonight. He's been on and off, which I appreciate. As always, Ray, he's talking about Dalmore cigar malt.
And he was all for you doing a 6 a.m. podcast.
Oh, I know he was because he's in Hong Kong. Or no, he's in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So, of course, he likes that time because that's his night. That's usually when I get a message from him, actually, is about that time, and I get it when I wake up.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, even though you're in front of the camera?
I didn't have any mid-episode questions for this one.
Dustin, how about you? No, quiet group tonight.
Well, No, I do remember doing a tasting seminar with Jose Blanco, who blends with Ernesto, and he was asking people questions like, what are, I think it was 5 characteristics that people look for in a cigar. And they were talking about construction and taste and stuff like that. And one of the things that he said that has really stuck with me was, what is the one thing that can ruin a perfect cigar?
Yeah.
And he starts asking people around the room, and people are like, oh, it has bad construction. He goes, no. I said it's a perfect cigar. Oh, it doesn't burn right. No. It's a perfect cigar. It burns right. It tastes right. Everything about the cigar is perfect. What's the one thing that can... And there's 30 people in the room, and we're all like, 10 people answered them, and all of our answers were wrong.
Yeah.
And so we're all like, quit asking us. Like, tell us what's the correct answer. The one thing that can ruin a perfect cigar, smoking it next to an asshole. That's exactly what he said. It doesn't matter how good the cigar is. You smoke it next to an asshole, it doesn't smoke that good.
Came in at the wrong time, bro.
Yeah, but it goes to what Steve said at one point, where you get people that are in trips to Dominican Republic, Mexico, Cuba, and they buy those cigars that someone's selling on the beach.
Right. Yeah.
Like four Cubans for $20. Like,
it tastes good because you're on the beach and you're drunk.
Exactly. Like, your environment is what makes that cigar good.
Absolutely. Start the recording again, and we're going to get a question from Sean here. So we have a question from our live studio audience. We got Sean here, who is a local cigar and also bourbon.
Yeah, I'm excited to have some of that Pogue here in a bit.
All right, yeah, definitely get it before it's gone. So,
yeah.
Go ahead with the question.
Yeah, question was, I've had cigars in the past where it's too tight, like you can't even get a draw off of because the fillers or whatever creates too tight. Is there a way to untighten it or make it smokable, or is it just you got to throw it out?
So you don't necessarily have to throw it out. I think that there is. So they sell something that we typically call a draw poker. And so what happens a lot of times, there is, so most of the reputable companies, most of the companies out there, they do a draw test, you know, so an airflow test. But even with those, it doesn't matter if it's a $2 cigar or a $20 cigar, you're going to have that happen because it's a hand-rolled product. And the life of that cigar before you actually smoke it is gonna change through the humidity. The humidity changes and everything else. Like, I compare it to, because my previous life was in the moving and storage industry.
Okay.
And anyone that has had especially nicer products of like wood furniture, and they move from, say, right now, where it's going to be like 35, 40 degrees here in the Midwest, and say they move out to Arizona, or they move out to, you know, down south.
Arizona.
Arizona. So you're going to have warping of the wood because it's a natural.
Right.
You know, the fibers of that product are going to be changing and shifting and all that stuff. It's much like the house settling and things like that. Things will change. That's what I consider was happening to some of these cigars.
When they're shipped from the original point to wherever they get to,
There's a lot of that. Or it's been sitting a long time. But it's going to happen because sometimes it just the fillers will kind of move a little bit or expand and contract. And in that process, even though it might have passed that test in the factory, you might have had an issue over time.
Right.
It could just be a rare point. That was, you know, with Spencer asking those questions, the same thing. If it breaks apart construction issues, do you walk away from that cigar or that brand? I wouldn't. I would definitely try another one. Now, if you've bought 3 out of 10 and they're doing that, that's your choice as a consumer if you want to go back to that.
If you don't have a poker.
Even if you don't want to have to draw poke every cigar that you're smoking, though, either. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah,
Even if
but
they're
to save that current cigar,
Yeah.
I would try draw poker, especially one of the ones that actually have a guide, because that's the whole other aspect of it. Is if you just got the loose one and you're actually going through from the cap where you cut it, you can actually, because of the way that might angle, if you're not going straight down, it might actually pierce the wrapper leaf. You might actually pierce your hand. You don't want to do all that stuff. But for the cigar, there is a technique, but sometimes it never gets better, and it's not enjoyable.
Even with the draw poker, does it still?
Sometimes it won't.
Really?
Sometimes it won't.
It's been a while since I've had that. I just used to have in the past, and it's the worst. You know, you've been looking forward to a cigar, and then it happens, and you're.
I will say that I've had some, and again, there's been $20 cigars that I've had that as you're smoking it, something about that roll, and it could be a factory issue. That's one of the reasons why they actually put that in a lot of cigars in the box for retails, especially. Retail shops can actually, if they have the box there and they're getting complaints from, say, you got 3 of you guys out there that are smoking the same cigar out of the same box, and it's like you light it up, you get into it, it smokes fine, all of a sudden it gets spongy in the middle and it gets hot and all that stuff. And then another person out of that box has that, another person out of that box has it. Out of 20 cigars, you've had 3 or 4 or 5 out of that. A lot of them will have some sort of indication on the box that a retailer can say, hey, we're having issues with this box. They can then track it back because it's a business.
Yeah.
They, depending on the factory, they've got a lot of, like hundreds, if you will, sometimes rollers or roller teams that they will go back to that and say, now they got to handle their business.
Sure.
So there's no perfection
If
there.
you have an at-home humidor, what humidity level should you keep that at-home humidor?
It's the rule of thumb is always 70-70 in my opinion. 70% relative humidity, and then 70 degrees is so there's some people that like it more at like 65 to 68. There's some people like it at 72. It's just all personal preference on how you like those cigars to smoke.
Can you bring cigars back to life?
As long as they're not too far gone. You know, if they're already cracked, the wrapper leaf's cracked, you're not going to save that one. Honestly, I don't think you're going to save that.
If you get a cigar that you've had in a humidor but without proper humidification for a year, you can bring it back. It's not going to taste like what it would have had you kept it properly humidified. It's going to be smokable. It still might be enjoyable, but it's not going to have the same flavors as it would have had you smoked it fresh.
I'm just going to bring it back to a different world, but in the wine world, some wines can go bad if you don't drink them in a certain amount of time.
Correct.
Is that the case with some cigars where, hey, if you don't smoke it by this year, it will go bad?
No.
Or, no.
No, I think there are some peaks on that. You know, as a cigar sits in the humidor for longer and longer, it'll like kind of not mellow out, but there'll be some life of that tobacco that it will not smoke the same way. Sometimes good, and I think people will get into that, you know what I mean? Because, again, with wines, it's much like that, where they say, you know, yeah, this year's good, but after 10 years in a wine cellar, it's not as good.
I mean,
it doesn't go bad.
What's the oldest cigar you've ever had?
I have no idea.
I mean, have you had something that's been 20, 25 years old?
No, I think I've had probably 10 year.
Does it do it for you, or I mean, is that?
It depends on the cigar.
It does. I had a cigar. I smoked it 4 years ago, and so that would have been 2014. And that cigar was actually rolled in June of '96.
It's a good year.
It must have been for this one, and it was a Robusto, and I smoked it all the way down to where I had nothing left for my fingers to hold, and I had nothing left to actually be able to draw from, and I hadn't ashed. Like an 18-year-old cigar without ever ashing the cigar. The construction still held up
That was good.
that well.
I want to say, Sean, go ahead.
But
No, go ahead.
just speaking from experience of doing that, I have a couple humidors. They've gone dry, and what I've done, and Steve may smack me for this, but it worked for me.
Careful.
Is I would get like distilled water, soak it in like a paper towel or something in it, like a sponge, and put them in a sealed bag, a couple of them, to kind of just let them sit there for a few days to get that back in there. Now it worked for me.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I got some at my house. We could bring for the show next time. We could do like a trial period if you guys ever want to do it. I think there's even some Cubans in there. I don't know, but it's been a while since I've
You have to say that quieter. But,
4 for 20.
Cuban counterfeit.
No, it's interesting you say that, and you know, and Bobby Crow had a question, you know, about can you patch a cigar with a leaf that if it cracks? I mean, there are techniques. I would recommend, and I typically do, if you've got something that has dried out, as long as it hasn't completely been, you know, disintegrating, where it's like flaking off all over. I always recommend doing it a slower process, because when you spike the humidity on a cigar, it's going to expand, and so if you're already dry and that wrapper leaf, the binder is drier, and you accelerate that. Now, if you're doing it in a few days, you might be all right just to smoke it. But ideally, I would say put it in a humidor that's working properly and wait 2 months. Oh. Let it gradually get that humidity back, so it's not going to have that quick expansion, and therefore you might have that problem that Bobby's mentioning, where you're going to have that where it might crack that wrapper leaf like right down the middle, you know, like the middle of it. And then at that point, you can smoke it, but it might actually start really like falling apart, popping, and all that stuff.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those.
If you've got a little tear or something like that, you can actually use like some sort of that pectin glue or whatever. And there are things you can get. You can even get on Amazon or some of your local brick and mortars might have it. But it's something that if you have a little bit of a crack, or when you cut it and then like the cap cracks, you can actually try to tie it together, if you will, with that pectin glue. But I want to get to the point, since we're getting on, so we don't have a 3-hour podcast.
Try and do 4.
I'd rather not do 4. If there's no other questions about the cigars or bourbon, I mean,
I will tell you the redeeming quality of this
that
cigar
fell apart because you knocked your mic over.
Is that this goes all the way to the bitter end, which is...
Is it bitter or no?
No,
You're
not
just using
bitter
that,
end.
Yeah.
This cigar has lasted all the way till the bitter end of the cigar.
Yeah.
So, construction-wise, I think it is a phenomenally constructed cigar that has gotten better as we have smoked it.
It's built nicely, and maybe that's part of the way that they judge the cigars for some of these ratings, is that you actually
It's
smoke
how
it
I
all the
judge
way
it
through.
on a golf course. Otherwise, this thing would be thrown.
Sure enough.
You can actually go to Aficionado's website, because they actually do a short video on all their top 10s, and then they do a longer video on the number 1, and they'll tell you like what they get out of it and what they're looking for.
And I would recommend everyone uses any of these awards, use them as guides. It might give you a reason to try it, but don't necessarily think that just because a publication or anyone else thinks it's a great cigar that you have to think it's a great cigar.
Fair enough.
I think that goes with anything in life, honestly. All right. What happened to fall?
It's cold, bro.
Fucking cold.
So we were in the same area today in Columbus,
Correct, yeah.
and all of a sudden it started to snow a little bit, my friend.
It literally was raining and transitioned to snow all in that same precipitation. It didn't like stop and come back as snow. It literally just changed. I haven't seen that to my recollection in years, if ever, that I actually saw rain switch to sleet, switch to snow?
So I listened to several podcasts through my travels, and I listened to some political ones. Not going to go which way I lean on these, but one of the questions that this podcast asks all the presidential candidates is, would you get rid of daylight savings time?
So that leads into part of this conversation, honestly.
So I got into, I leave kind of early, I get back kind of late, but is it 4:30, 5 o'clock when it gets dark these
about
days?
5, a shade after, yeah.
So this is the point of the time of year where we get home and it's not going back out season. Like once you're home, you're home. If you were a dictator of the world, Nate and Steve, would you get rid of daylight savings time?
Nate, go ahead.
Yes.
You would?
Go on.
Well, I mean, so I leave the house a little bit after 6, and then I actually have about a 45-minute walk to work. And this time of year, or
45-minute walk to work?
2.5 miles.
No, you're making good time. I'm just curious as to why
So
you're walking.
good pace.
I mean,
so
I'm not sure of your transportation
No.
scenario, but
so
it's a brisk walk in the morning.
So my wife works at Ohio State. So the Ohio State University. So we drive to Ohio State, and then I walk from the hospital to downtown where my office is.
Right.
And the reason we do that, because I could
have a cigar.
No, I don't. I have a cup of coffee.
Jennings,
No.
Trader,
Black Rifle Coffee Company. That's what I.
sponsor.
No, I wish, but no. This time of year, when I get into my walk, it's completely dark outside.
At 6 a.m.?
Well, but from the time I actually get to the hospital to the time I get to the office, it's from about 6:40 to 7:30, around that time.
Yeah.
And it's still very, very dark during that time. And that's the time of year where I have a tendency to get hit by cars more than during the summer.
You have to walk on the sidewalk.
I am walking on the sidewalk and in the crosswalk with right-of-way, but people don't pay attention, and it's dark out, and they don't see me, and I've been hit a couple times.
You've been hit by a car a couple of times?
4. Well, 3 by a car, 1 by a motorcycle.
Nope.
No.
No comment.
No comment on
I got
your
nothing.
good friend has been hit by a car 4 times recently. It's been saving time for a
literally
week.
should have seen it coming.
What shade of black are you wearing?
The
None.
darkest.
I actually sometimes during the winter
We'll take some donations for a fluorescent reflective vest.
I wear a hunter orange vest,
Need to be reflective.
and
Maybe they're aiming for you.
maybe. And what I'll also do sometimes is I'll carry one of those sports air horns, and so when someone like goes into the intersection or is about ready to turn on top of me, you just sit there and blow that air horn right at them.
You've still been hit 4 times?
None with the air horn.
All right. So you're for the time change is where we're getting from this.
No, get rid of the daylight savings time. So that way it's still light out when
Okay.
I'm walking to work.
Okay. Well, Bobby says, it was originally for farmers to have more sunlight.
Is that true, or is that a urban myth?
I don't know. And Doug Ruffalo says, hit 4 times explains so much. Doug knows you. But I would say,
It was Ben Franklin's idea, all right?
Was it?
you getting hit?
No, time change.
No.
I haven't heard much about him these days. You don't hear enough about Ben Franklin.
He's not doing as much these days.
Not as much as he used
He's
to.
not in the news.
I tell you what.
He had his peak with the whole kite thing, and then since then, just he's been very quiet.
Yeah, the $100 bill. Okay. I think the daylight savings time. It does. I don't care. You know what I mean? I don't care about the daylight savings times. If there's purpose for it, great. It's still going to affect you getting dark earlier. Your biological clock. I don't care what it says on the actual time.
Rely on the sun.
There's adjustments to be made. As you go through different periods of the year, depending on where you live. But where we are in the Midwest, at least. I mean, yeah, it's the when it first changes, depending on which way you're going, you're either going to be more tired typically in the morning or more tired at night. I don't. This time of the year, it's not the matter of the shift. It's like, all right, so if it wasn't 5 o'clock when the sun was setting, it'd be what time? Right now,
6.
6. Still early.
Yeah,
and I'm still fucking tired. My body's still like I have always been that way when this happens, especially when we're talking about the abrupt change of the weather like we had this year, especially. It all happened at once, in my opinion. Like it was kind of warmer and all that stuff, and then the sun was, it's like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden it's 7. You're like, oh man, it's not that bad. And then it's just like boom, it got cold, and now it's like dark when you wake up and dark when you go to sleep. That's going to happen no matter what time it is.
So I know that you guys had the podcast on a Thursday, which happened to be Halloween this year.
Yeah, last
week. Did you hand out candy at all?
Liz, her mom, William the Red, who's been on, they passed out candy, yeah.
Okay, so...
And it was freezing, and actually there were flurries that night, too.
So I'm from Cleveland, which is 5 degrees colder, and we always get a little bit more snow than we do here, lake effect, things like that.
Right.
When I was growing up, and when we were growing up, we're all about the same age, it was snowing a lot during Halloween.
Yeah.
But
there were other years that, at least for us, like I remember it was rather warm.
I remember my dad playing
unpredictable.
A couple years ago, my dad was playing golf on Christmas Eve because it was 60 degrees.
What part of Phoenix was your dad playing golf in?
Canal Winchester.
Phoenix. Gorgeous.
That is south.
Yeah, you go to Brewdog, you go to U of A. It's a good time.
Yeah. But no, I think regardless of the time change, I think that's about like everyone wants to talk about that. But like I said, I think you're gonna have the effect on you regardless of what the time on the clock says. I mean, it might hurt a bit more or be beneficial when it goes the other way.
The one thing I decided not to do a few years ago, and I've been in this garage or the other garage when it's been humid, or how do you pronounce it, Steve?
Hard H.
Humid.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't complain when the weather is hot in Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
Because it's going to be cold, and then people are going to complain about the cold. Now, as a retail establishment, I am wondering if you sense, and I get people are buying stuff for the holidays starting now, but do you sense a different vibe after 4 o'clock when
Oh, yeah.
with the people in general, and hey, they're coming to the store, so they really want something?
No, I think in the retail, so we this is the time of the year that it slows down because it is getting colder. You look at the cigar smokers out there, you look at the social bourbon drink, you think of everyone doing outdoor activities. You're either trying to cram in your last household chores, taking care of the lawn, you're taking care, you're doing all this stuff. But once it hits, nighttime, whether that time is 8 o'clock at night in the summer or if it's 5 o'clock at night right now, everyone changes a bit, especially at first. Typically no one likes change in general, but no one likes the change in that because you're programmed. It doesn't matter if it happens every year and you're 20 years old, you're 50 years old, whatever age you are, it does affect you one way or another, and it affects your hobbies, your habits, and everything else. So we do notice that it slows down in the evenings until we get to the holiday shopping season.
Do you notice a difference so there's obviously the cigar community at the Tinder Box. Do you guys notice a different group hanging out in the evening?
I don't, because our regulars are regulars for a reason. Our locker members have stuff there. I mean, so if they don't have anything to do at home, they're still going to come by. It's more the golfers aren't coming in. The people that want to grab a cigar and then go sit next door at Fido's on the patio and have a cocktail or something, those people aren't coming in as much. You don't get as many people just coming in, buying cigars and taking them home unless they have a warmer place like a sunroom or Three Seasons room that they can
cold
smoke.
Garage.
Yeah, or a cold garage. They want to bundle up and forget to turn the propane heater on or something like that.
And forget, it's just too loud.
Yeah, well, not with these mics. You don't get those types of people. It's more the people that are coming in. They want to have a cigar while they're there, or they're buying a cigar for a special occasion, for someone's birthday, or they're going to a party.
I think people's habits change in the wintertime, and that's part of it. Is that the abrupt change, which is what we're dealing with. That's going to be anything. It's going to change the way you react to it. It's going to change your day to day, and yeah, daylight savings time is always to blame, or it's getting dark early. It's like, get over it if you want to. If you want to go out and if it's like 7 o'clock at night and like, yeah, you can't go out to patios, but if you want to go out for a drink, or if you want to go hang out with friends at another house, at someone's house, or you invite people over, everyone seems to cocoon themselves up for the winter. There's that little bit of that hibernation thing where, and someone brought up, and we talked about it earlier about being part of this conversation, but, Bobby said something about seasonal depression. I think it all leads into that. Literally, when we were talking about it between the three of us about the subject tonight, seasonal depression, we introduced it into the conversation. So I went on, as anyone would anymore, as you go on Google, you search seasonal depression. Several articles, there was really they have a season, it was like, there was an abbreviation for it, but it was like, it's everything I read, there was no real, like,
definitive. There's no definitive,
but it's like, talk to someone. It's, get some sunlight, do all these things. It's like, yeah, no shit. You know what I mean? But there's like, go on a mild antidepressant if you want to talk to your doctor about to get you through the winter. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like,
I think that's a little severe.
I mean, part of it is they talk about, like, the vitamin D thing. And vitamin D deficiency is a real thing, and it does affect your mood all day long. So I will say that I don't care in this day and age, especially in the United States, for a lot of people, even if it is summertime and you work in a cubicle or an office, you're not getting sunlight. You're not outside. You know what I mean? It's something that it's like, okay, you get out and hopefully you get out and have to do something on the weekends, but if you're going to really get that affected by it, I would say go see a doctor, but not for a mild antidepressant. It's go to a doctor because there's something else going on.
Yeah, I think that's a cop-out. So I'm going to go two different routes with this. One is, so there's...
And Rich, sorry, I want to interrupt real quick.
You're good.
Rich Bax, who's been really active in the conversation, says it's SAD, which is... all right.
It makes you question whether or not he's making it up.
No, that's exactly what I saw. Seasonal affective disorder, and he says it's real. It happens in Alaska. Again, I think that, if you live in Alaska, I know it does because it's dark for a lot of hours there.
Or it's light for 24 hours sometimes.
Right. But it's, I think we're all programmed for that. But, I mean, it's like it happens in Alaska. Yeah, it's dark and cold all the time. I mean, that's normal. Like, you don't have the functionality going out there. I think there is part of it that you can adapt to that.
Yeah. So two quick things. One is, so there's... if you mentioned vitamin D, if you get 5 minutes of sunlight, just go outside and get 5 minutes of sunlight, that's the same energy that you get from getting a cup of coffee. So if you want to wake up...
Like, you've read this.
I have heard this by several different, not astronomers, that's not the right word for it, scientists.
Sure, let's call them scientists.
But being outside for 5 minutes, just being in the sun, gives you the same amount of energy as a cup of coffee if you're trying to wake up. That gives you the same caffeine boost. Second part is, so I got grandparents that are 96 and 94. They spent half their year in Ohio, half their year in Florida, and they've been doing that for 40-plus years.
Nice.
In my opinion, that might be what has kept them alive for all these years by not experiencing any winters. They have decided for health reasons to move back to Ohio full time. And this is going to be their first winter they've ever experienced.
They're going to be miserable.
They're going to be miserable. So I do think that there's something to being in the sun. I know California has, obviously wildfires and things along those lines. But for the most, and I don't know if people appreciate the weather less because they take it for granted there in San Diego, things like that. Or I also think that being in Ohio, being in Boston, things like that makes you tougher. And I think that Columbus in general, if you are outside in summertime and you see girls, people, whatever, it's a much different city in summertime, in spring. People just pop out of the woodwork. And I think that we appreciate it more. Yeah. And I know people say they love the seasons and things like that. I don't know as many people who love 40 degrees and rainy. But I think that there is definitely a thing to, we appreciate the summer more because we have to deal with this a few months a year.
Well, yeah. So when we talk about abrupt change, anywhere else in life, what are the steps you have to do? So if something absolutely changes, your job changes, relationship changes, you know what I mean? Like, it's out of your control. Okay? So what are the steps that you actually utilize to do this part of it?
All right, I see where your head's at. So for me, change doesn't bother me as much as it may bother some other people. I'm adaptable to change as long as I know what the change is. I don't do as well in limbo situations where if I don't know that things are going to go one way or the other. I just like knowing, is it a yes or a no? But as soon as I get the yes or a no, or at least know what direction the change is, I can adapt to those types of situations.
And do you consider yourself one to have seasonal depression?
No, I think that is a bullshit thing.
Yeah,
Why?
Obviously,
Because it's a mindset. You know, I know
that's what I'm getting at.
I know Crane does a thing, you know, where he does the focus and, hey, you gotta, you know, you go into the gym, you know, the first day of spring, the gym is packed versus you go there on a night like tonight and it might be empty. But
the mornings have been much slower. I mean, that's part of it. That's what I was getting at, is that this part of it is that you are a person that doesn't allow that abrupt change. You want that yes or no, so then you can react to it and alter what you're doing. Yeah. That's what I'm getting at, is that with seasonal depression, and I'm not saying people, like, I'm not talking down to that condition. What I'm saying is that I think there is a bit of a mindset. There's action involved.
There's definitely a mindset. There's definitely, as you know, if you want to nest more, you want to hang out by the fireplace more, things along those lines. That I completely understand, just due to the circumstances. But I think if you're willing to attack the day in the spring, that you should be able to attack the day in November and December. Now, the conversations that you might have with other people, you know, I think it's important to understand if they're going through it, and hey, you know, we're winding the year down. We have the holidays coming up. You know, you got Thanksgiving, you got the end of the year. You're trying to, you know, end your year strong or wind it down. I get that aspect of it, but just because it's cold outside or it's too hot outside, I personally think that that's an excuse. But, you know, if some people deal with it, great. I'm not going to rain on their parade, but that's just my thought.
Well, that's a couple of the questions that I had brought down or written down in preparation for this episode was, like, if you're someone, if we know that there is such a thing as seasonal depression, like,
do we know that that's a thing?
What?
Well, it's a thing. I mean, there's enough
people obviously go through it
on it. You know what I mean? There's enough people talking about it.
But I think one of the important aspects is, you know, personally, like, what you have to be able to recognize that if you hit that, or what would cause that, and then once you recognize that issue, that's when then you can make changes. Like, how do you avoid falling into that? Like, what steps do you take to where you don't get the seasonal depression or something like that?
Well, I want to say, and Sean's got another question or comment. I wanted to say what Spencer's talking about, in my opinion, and what I think that is very relevant here and what we're talking about, is the abrupt change. Again, I'm really trying to tie these two things together, even though they're not typically tied together. They're not talking, like, when change happens. You like what you were talking about is literally what's happening. When everything's good in life and everything's going well, you're typically in a better mood. Well, so
you're a man you're a man of routine, correct?
I am.
So when you deal with abrupt change as to when shit hits I don't want to say when shit hits the fan. I know you guys have kind of covered that, but if there's abrupt change, are you changing your outlook? Are you changing mentally what happens? Are you just saying, like, hey, I know this change is going on, realize it, but continue to do what you do so that this change doesn't affect you one way or another?
No, I think you can that first part is realizing. That's my point here, is that you realize the daylight savings time. You realize it's getting colder. You realize all this stuff. It's like, you can't just wish for summer again. You can't just wish that things were good in life again. Like, someone dumped you. You lost a job. If you just cocoon up for the winter of your life, you know what I mean, of that period, that season of your life, you're not going to get any further.
You're just wasting time, in my opinion.
Yeah, you have to, and it's fine to heal. You can do all that stuff, and I think that's what the seasonal depression really is. I think that you get to that point where you're at that level where you're not happy with your surroundings, and that's what I'm trying to bring this tied together, is that when shit happens in your life, you don't actually just keep rolling with it so easily and just shrug it off. It's like, oh, it's colder. Oh, I got dumped. Like, cool. Like, I'll just wake up tomorrow. No, you actually have to do something about it. You know what I mean? You have to realize it. Doug says that, you know, his wife gets affected by it, and she has a therapy light that helps her. She actually did something about it. I don't care if you agree with that.
What is a therapy light?
Therapy light usually is like it's like a UV, or not like the bad UVs, but it's like a sunlight simulator or whatever.
Red light, blue light, something like that.
I think it's just something that's like basically stimulates you based on like acting as if it was sunlight. So you have brighter light. It's not just you're in your home. You actually have I think it's a brighter light that. And Doug, if you want to chime in there, I think that it's something that simulates that warmness, that bright light.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Whatever works for you. You know,
that's my point.
Yeah. So some people, you know, even when they know they're taking the placebo, it still works on them for whatever reason. I think that the mind is stronger. Sean, go ahead, man. My bad.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just coming from the past few months was I had a really bad injury. I tore my quad, and
You gotta walk that off, bro.
Oh, I did. I walked
some
it off.
dirt on it.
I walked it off a lot.
Put some tussin.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Let me tell you. But
Windex.
it was my right leg. I couldn't drive. I work from home. For essentially 3 months, I'd have to have people drive me, and you become aware of how you take driving for granted to being able to go do things. So, in a way, it was the middle of the summer, and I wouldn't say it was a seasonal depression, but it was that same kind of sense of I was trapped. I felt I was locked in a place.
It's abrupt change.
Yeah. So what did I do about it? Well, the first few months I lost my mind, and then I felt like I had to do something. So I've been doing any kind of exercise I could that I was allowed to do. Now I've taken that on to the next level. Now that I'm kind of recovering a little more, I can do a little more. I've noticed when I do exercise now, even when it's the way it is now, I feel so much better. And I think when people get stuck in a routine where they're at home all the time, they get more what's that word? Sedentary, sorry. And it's easy to fall into that sluggish, lazy, whatever you want to call it, and that leads to that depression because there's nothing you do. So I guess what I can say, and I'm on 2 different kinds of antidepressants. That's another long story.
If you have extras.
I've got plenty. Whatever you want.
No. All right. Keep it above board here.
No, I'm fine. No, but what I'm saying is that
off the air, please.
There's something you can. I mean, exercise is a huge way. It doesn't have to be intense or not much, but just from the past few weeks of me doing it, my energy level, my focus, my overall
gives you endorphins, man.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with doing something in your house just to get the blood running, and that can definitely help in some ways. So
yeah, I do agree with the fact, you know, Steve, you talked about, hey, you got to talk to someone, things like that. You know, we as a species are becoming much more isolated, and obviously, you know, dealing more with our phones and thinking that that's the real reality. But, you know, whether it's a softball team, a soccer team in an event like this, you know, where we have, you know, several people together, whether it's a cigar shop, things like that. But I do think that human interaction in groups can offset some of that. But if you're just willing to just hang out with you and your partner, or you solo in your place, that it can just weigh on you, and the depression can weigh on you. And maybe that's where the seasonal stuff comes on.
Well, look, you have to change sometimes. So with the seasonal thing, if we're talking the literal part of this, what happened to fall, is one way you can actually, I think, work through this is your summer activities, your spring activities, your fall activities, whatever it might be. And to speak to Sean's point, when everything is going well, you're healthy, you don't think about these types of things, you have your hobbies, you have the things you enjoy. When something changes or the seasons change, have your winter activities. You know what I mean? Try to find something that you enjoy doing. It might be different, but you have to segment that a little bit. So for you, Sean, with the injury, it's the same thing. You go through kind of that same abrupt change. It's out of your control. So now you have to adapt to it. So now that's exactly what you described, is now you found some things that have brought you kind of back to life, back to, you know, all of that stuff. And I'm not going to talk poorly about antidepressants or anything like that. I think maybe we're a little bit too reliant on some of that stuff these days. But I will say that sometimes that gives you that little bit of an edge to get back to it, and then you can get off those antidepressants. You could, because you found those hobbies or you found the activities that will actually bring you joy And then once you get into the summertime, I mean, you know, I think about the fact that it's like in the wintertime, you like to go see lights. You like to start a fire. That may not be something that you enjoy doing in the summer when it's 80 or 90 degrees, but you enjoy it when it's that time of the year. It's something to look forward to. Well, it's not about getting, like, yeah, it got dark, so now I get to, instead of going out and playing sports, I'm not out, you know, mowing the lawn. I'm not out, you know, working in the yard, and some people really enjoy some of that stuff, or I'm not going out and sitting on patios or, you know, like having, like, you know, barbecues. But now this is the time of year that I invite people over to the house. I'm still going to try to stay social, to Spencer's point, but I'm going to have them over for a dinner party at the house. Yeah. So I'm going to be able to do that. And I'm going to start a fire, and we're going to have some, you know, warm cider, or we're going to have, you know, some wine or whatever it is. It's still trying to find those things that make you happy, but you have to alter that.
Yeah, I think it's real important to have things in life to look forward to. You know, some people that's Thanksgiving, some people it's Christmas, you know, things along those lines. But to have stuff to plan, you know, when someone says what's new or what do you have going on, and you have nothing to say, hey, I'm doing this in a couple months, I'm doing this next week, that's a bad spot to be in. One of my companies that I work for is out of Minnesota, and you would think that, you know, every time I talk to them, like, oh, it's pretty cold in Minnesota. But those people, they embrace the winter. You know, they do ice fishing, they do outdoor activities. Yeah. You can either attack, you can go skiing, you can do all sorts of different things. You can either embrace the change or you can fight it. But if you're going to fight it, it's just a losing battle. So my suggestion is to embrace it and to figure out stuff that you can do, whether it's winter activities, whether it's stuff to look forward to, whether you're taking a long weekend away, whatever it is, but to embrace the challenge and go for it. Otherwise, you got 3 or 4 months of the year, especially in Ohio, that, you know, aren't that much fun if you're just sitting at home, you know, by the fire, just hanging out.
Well, I think one of the things we're touching on is when you have the abrupt change, whether it's weather, relationships, or job, is don't shut down. Like, just because the weather changes and it's colder and you can't go out to the beach, that doesn't mean you can't do something social. You know, if a relationship ends abruptly, you know, that doesn't mean you have to stay cooped up in your house all day and never talk to people. Like, no, you can still go out and be sociable, and you may not be sociable with that person anymore, but you can still be sociable with other people.
And if your true friends are and true people who got your back in those tough situations.
Or if you lose your job, I'm sure we've all had a period of time where we've lost a job before. I know when I did, like, the worst thing I could do was stay at home. Because if I was staying at home, all I was doing was thinking about losing my job and what it was doing to my family, and that just made me more and more miserable. But once I actually got to work and started doing something, even though it was something I didn't care for, didn't want to do, it was still something. And, you know, that gave me a purpose.
Half the battle in life is showing up. So you don't have to say yes to everything, but if you say yes to doing more things than to other things, Steve, if you invite people over to cider, I'm sure, or to have wine, I'm sure some people show up, some people don't. But the ones that are willing to get their butt out of bed and show up, those people are happy that they came. And like I said, in life, half the battle is just showing up.
Well, I'm interested to see. So we've got on the Facebook feed Rich, who has been very active again. I like that, you know. But he did say, people are complex. What works with one won't work with another. Refrain from issues that you aren't familiar with. So I asked for him to explain a little bit further, and I hope he does, because that's absolutely right. People are complex, and what doesn't work for one will work for another, and vice versa. The whole point of this podcast is to talk things through, at least especially with the cigars. We want to talk it through, give people suggestions, give a little bit of insight there. You know, bourbons, hang on. And then with the life topics is, we're not familiar with everyone's situations out there, and some people do really battle with depression. People do battle with the seasonal depression. I will say, first and foremost, if you are doing that, I have battled with depression. I've battled with seasonal depression. I mean, the time change we talk about like that, like my mom has always said, even since I was a little kid, like when the time changes, especially this time of the year, I am absolutely wrecked. My mood changes, my motivation changes ever since I was like 6, 7, 8 years old until
your
now.
Mom?
My mom will, we talked about it, and she even said when I talked to her this week, she said she finally got to the level that I was at, where like this week has actually really brought her down. Last week or so is like really kind of brought her down, and she's now in her 70s, where this has been happening to me. Same genetic pool that I've been dealing with this all my life, where I now have gotten to the point where I did have a couple of bad days this, maybe a week or so recently, where my mood was not the same. And it's taken me up until about yesterday, today, to really just take action on it. And I realized that I needed to get a little bit more sleep. I needed to stop trying to do everything I was doing necessarily in the summer or spring, because if I do that, I wear myself down because I'm already battling that. My body reacts differently to that. But I have gotten to the point where, when we've talked about it, if you do listen to the podcast, that over the last several years, I have had blood tests. I have done these things where I've talked to a doctor, and I haven't gone on antidepressants necessarily, and maybe that helps, like I said, for some people. But there are other issues that might be happening here, that you're being affected by the way your body chemistry is going through the changes with that. And that's where I'm trying to really kind of equate the seasonal depression to abrupt changes in life, because I think there is some relation. These are out of your control, and there are things that you can actually take action and try to address it, as opposed to just letting it defeat you. And that might be the first very big step of that, is talking to someone, whether it be a doctor, a friend, or whatever it is you still have to take action. I'm not saying I don't feel bad for people, and I don't want people to feel bad for me necessarily when I've gone through that. But the one thing that I've learned in 39 years so far is the fact that you do actually have to take action and go find help, whether it's through yourself, the motivation, the self-motivation. But if that doesn't work, then you have to do something about it. You can't just, like Spencer said earlier, you're just wasting time until the spring comes around. You can't do that, in my opinion, because it's miserable, and you owe it to yourself to take at least that first step and try to help yourself with that, with seasonal depression or anything else.
I don't disagree with you on that. I think it's also important to, if you know somebody who can get kind of in that rabbit hole, to try to get their butt out of it. To, hey man, let's do this, let's do that, or things along those lines. Or if that's a trait with your mom, to try to do something to not snap her out of it, but at least make that day a little better for her.
No, I mean, at this point, now that she said that, I'm gonna call her a little bit more often this week. You know what I mean? Next week, and try to. If you know people, that's another good fact, is that if you are on the other side of that and things are going poorly, or seasonal depression for that individual in your life that you have in your close social circle, hopefully, that you actually reach out, even if it's in a passive way, is to just keep talking to them, just saying, not like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
you don't talk down to them. Yeah, exactly. Hey, how's it going this week? It's all right. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, well, what's going on? Like, what have you done? You just kind of keep them talking. Make sure that you're at least having a hand out there to, if they want to gravitate towards it, if they want to talk to you about just their day, that they have that, as opposed to just going home and then just staying home and waiting until they wake up the next morning.
I also think that there are some people that they don't know it, but their comfort zone is being in a bad place, or being uncomfortable, being depressed, and that's their comfort zone. They don't necessarily want to be there, but that's where they're comfortable being. So, you try to, when someone asks you, hey, how you doing? You try to, most
Fine.
people, right. But in general, if the way someone asks you a question, hey, how are you? You go, I'm good. How are you? And that's the proper responses to, however they phrase the question to you, is you rephrase it back in the same tone. But if they're going down that deep rabbit hole, is I'm not good, this is what happened to me, that's where they want to be at. And sometimes you just got to be like, all right, man, or all right, family member, like, you're in that spot. It's not my job to get you out of it, but it's my job to realize that that's where you're at. And I can give you 10 solutions to get out of there, but sometimes people don't want the solutions to get out of there. Sometimes they just want to sit in there and sulk in their own shit. And I'm not saying it's right, but that's just kind of where they're at.
So what do you do when you have that friend or family member, spouse, someone who's close to you, who likes to be in that spot? Like, do you try to pull them out?
I've dealt with families, in my past of, significant others where they've been either there's a state of sickness in the family, someone's sick and that's just, or they like to be depressed and they like to kind of rule the roost from the home. Hey, here's how I want to control the world. It's from my couch, from my bed, and I just want to call everyone and how are you doing? Here's what's not going right at home. And you can either succumb to it or you can try to be like, I'm good. How are you? But sometimes you just got to realize, man, that you can lead a horse to water, but if they're not willing to, take any steps, then all right, here are the 10 solutions. You can take one. If you're not taking any, that's okay. I'm just going to kind of let you do your thing, but your depression is not going to bring me down necessarily.
Well, now you turn it away. You're right. So it's interesting. Doug says, it's not true. They don't want to be there. I don't think anyone wants to be there, but I think you're saying, Spencer, that it is a comfort zone.
Yeah, they don't want to be there, but that's what they're used to. That's what they know. They know that their version of depression is what they're comfortable with. And hey, we could do all these things to bring you out of that state of mind. But if they don't want, just like with anything, if you want to quit drinking, you have to want to quit drinking. If you want to stop to be depressed, you have to I've knock on wood, never been in that situation, but you have to have the want to at least not be depressed. Some people are in bad states of mind where they're depressed and they don't necessarily want to come out of it, or at least they're not willing to put in whatever the case may be to get them out of it. And that's okay if they don't want to. You can give it your old college try and try to get them out of it. But if they're in it, all right, accept that they're in it, and that's your new reality. But hopefully it doesn't affect your reality.
Well, it's interesting because, Rich, again, he did actually come back and say, you guys babble about things you don't even really know about. Stick to bourbon and cigars. There's a lot to explore there. And I'm glad you say that, Rich, because we say it on most of our podcasts, and I don't think we actually said it tonight. We're not experts. This whole podcast is truly about like the atmosphere of a cigar shop, of people hanging out, friends hanging out, is that it's talking through some things. So you're right, we're not experts. So I mean, we don't know everyone's situation. So what we actually speak from, I want to say something here, is that we speak from our own experience. So you may not like what anyone on the panel any given night.
Not trying to give advice either.
Well, you know what? People can take it from, because we have a lot of people that actually do enjoy what we have to say because it does hit close to where they're at. So when you have thousands of people, which we do have thousands of people that watch or listen to this, is that it's not going to be applicable. And if you don't like it, I mean, Rich, I love having you on, and I appreciate your participation, and everyone else out there goes for you guys too. If you don't enjoy the whole podcast, you don't enjoy the bourbon, you don't enjoy the whiskey that we're drinking, you don't enjoy the cigars we're smoking, or you don't enjoy the topic, or you don't agree with us, that's all part of it. I mean, that's absolutely fair. You don't always have to agree with the things you listen to on the air.
Hopefully you don't.
Well, and you don't, and I'm not telling you to do that, but I'll say if you don't like what we have to say about that, or where the conversation as a group goes, then you can turn it off. I have no problem with that. Oh, this is an no.
Agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. I mean, you can enjoy the conversation, because what we're addressing here is we're not addressing any individual person. So I don't know if Rich is going through something right now, but the whole point of it is that this is the opinion of people that we're just having conversation about it. And to that point, the people out there don't necessarily know the individual. We have different people on the panel every week that you don't know what everyone else has been through. And so that's where, talking about the seasonal depression, we're not trying to tell people that they're wrong that they're going through it, or any depression or anything like that. And I agree with Doug, is that no one really likes to be depressed. I will rephrase what Spencer says, because in my mind, I know people very close to me that's just the way that they are. And you can help them, you can talk to them, you can do all that stuff, but they are like, unfortunately, that character in Winnie the Pooh, they're Eeyore. They sulk. You can't get them out of it. There's no medication that I want to say, like, oh, just get on medication that's going to get you out of that. No, it's like, at least go do what I did, and so
there's no universal cure.
I do know what I'm talking about. I did go see a doctor. I had blood tests, and I had things taken care of, as far as, like, I've talked about it before, is that for a man in their late 30s, is that I'm on testosterone. You know what I mean? There was a hormone deficiency Then so I went to someone that actually knows who they're talking about, and I went to them, and my life has changed.
And that worked for
and
you.
that worked for me.
But it
and
might
I'll
not work for everyone.
Well, I recommend at the very least you go. And I had all the vitamins, all the minerals. There's 4 pages of blood test for that. And I'll tell you, since I had that, and there were some other tweaks and making sure I had more vitamin D, as we talked about, that was something that, since I have talked to a professional that specializes in that, and I'm not on any antidepressants, I'm not talking down about that, but I will say I actually took the step to go get something. I took an action. And for me, it actually has helped thus far. Being 39, if I've got hopefully another 40 years at least on this earth, if I do, I know I'm going to run into other hurdles. I know it's not always going to be that easy. And I've been through ups and downs. I've been divorced. I've had bad relationships. I've had great relationships. Currently, I'm in a good place in my life. When we started this podcast, not as much. So even if you go from...
Those were fun episodes.
They were fun episodes. But I like that we have some viewers out there that say we don't know what we're really talking about. You know what? I don't know what everyone's going through. I'm just telling you from our viewpoint that this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, and that's
I think there's value to that.
Well, and that's kind of why I touched on it earlier. Like, I've never gone through the seasonal depression stuff. I've gone through some bad breakups that put me into a state of depression. I've gone through some job losses that put me into that state. But it was just the way that, there were things that I did to get out of that state that worked for me. They may not work for everyone else, but, what I didn't do was just sit at home by myself and sulk in my misery in either situation. Yeah. May have done that for a little bit of time, but the longer I did it, the worse I felt, and I hated that feeling. And so there came a point in each of those cases where there was something that hit me where I'm like, no, I'm going to make a choice to stop.
Get off your ass and do something.
I'm going to make a choice to stop feeling this way, and I'm going to do something about it.
Take a step.
So the first thing I did was I recognized what the problem was. Second thing I did was figure out a plan of action, like how do I fix it, and then put it into use.
Gotcha. Sean.
Yeah, sorry. I really enjoy doing this.
Having a studio audience.
This is my first time being on podcast, so I'm like all about it now. One thing that I haven't really talked to you about, Steve, and I've known you for a little bit, is I had a brain tumor about 20 years ago, and it was benign, but it affected my pituitary gland, which controls all your hormones.
Absolutely.
I do take testosterone as well because my body doesn't produce it. Thyroid medication, and along with the antidepressants and a whole cocktail of things I take, and been doing it for 20 years. And with all that, I fight depression all the time. And I'm sure people that listen that have fought it gets to a point where it's hard to get out of when you get in it.
Absolutely.
Nothing helps. Nothing matters. All you're trying to do is survive each day. And I've gone to Netcare, which is, I was thinking about ending my life a few times and gone there for help.
It's a great organization.
And I've seen counselors. My wife's a counselor. She's helped me. But through all the years I've been dealing with that, I as hard as it was, I didn't quit. And to this day, I'm kind of a walking testimony for it because there are so many times I could have just pulled the plug and said, screw it, but I didn't. And for whatever reason, just being able to, I try to take it once, the biggest thing that when I would see a counselor and it helped me through it is he always said to stay in the present. And I used to like to project a lot, worry about something that may or may not happen. When you do that, that'll send you down into a spiral depression. There's not a problem till there is one. So there's a lot of things you can kind of go by with, at least take, just focusing on the present really helped me a lot. And I went through a year of counseling to kind of it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
It takes time to learn that. So anyway,
just taking those steps that you did to go to the counseling, to go to the doctor, to contact Netcare, which is again a great organization.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big lesson for me listening to that story is that you somehow, you said it's not easy, and you're absolutely right, but somehow you actually took the first step and you did something about it.
Yeah. And is it going to happen again? Probably. But I can learn from the past of what I dealt with. Even when I'm in the worst, time of my life, I know that there is a light, but sitting at home and staring at the wall isn't going to be the end all be all. It's not going to fix it. You got to try at least, and it's nothing something you have to go out and try to make this huge change. It's just small steps, and that's what helped me through it. So,
but there's steps there, and that's what you did.
Yeah,
I think that's what we've been talking about too. I mean, you're preaching about what we were talking about with a lot of identity, which I appreciate.
Yeah, that's why I felt like when this was going on, it's like I had to share it because I'm walking proof of it, and I'm still on a lot of medication, and I probably will be for the rest of my life, but it's just part of my life now, and I'll explain some other time later, but there's all the neat stories about
we got after hours.
Yeah, it's just
beyond the BS.
Yeah, it's just
that's when
I'll tell you some other time, but there's I have a daughter that I adopted from China that led to me having because of the brain tumor, we couldn't have kids, and just in a nutshell, that's what brought our daughter to us is because of my brain tumor,
which is amazing.
Yeah, so
that's super powerful.
Yeah, man. So there's a longer story to it, but that's for some other time. But anyway, just wanted to put my 2 cents out there. So
all right, that's tough stuff, man. That's amazing. That's super powerful. I thank you for sharing that.
Well, and that's what's great about this is we have so many people that listen, that participate, that chime in on the community page. It's just a bigger version of the cigar shop. Like we're talking through things. We're trying to help each other. Like we're not doing this all for our own benefit. Like we're actually out there trying to help ourselves and others.
He's doing it for his own benefit, for the record.
He's sitting out.
He's doing it for the cash, if that matters.
Yeah, so much cash. So much cash.
He's sitting in his garage freezing his ass off.
On top of cash.
I don't even have a chair underneath me because there's so much cash.
You're just that frozen.
But that's why it's cold, hard cash.
I am. So I've listened to all 92, and I'm a little jealous because you guys do have this 2 to 3 hour. It's a therapy session for better or worse. It is surrounded by the bourbon and the cigar, but you guys do have this, session once a week where you guys can talk through your problems and talk through your stuff. And I can't tell you how many of my friends are just like, whoa, you guys talk to people for 3 hours without your phone in front of you
we do
and
it more
things
than
like
once
that?
a week.
Yeah,
we do the podcast once a week.
There's definitely some benefit with that without going super alt-right. Just some guys, just talking about some stuff, and it's a luxury that I'm not sure if you guys will appreciate while you're in it. But I can tell you, as from an outsider, that it doesn't go unnoticed that most people don't have the opportunity to talk to their friends for 2 to 3 hours ever.
Well, exactly right, and that's what I think we've found with the audience. I know I've like I said, I've dealt with levels of depression. And I've dealt with again relationship issues, job issues, everything, financial issues, all that stuff. And
problems don't go away; they just change over the years.
They do.
You just have different types of problems, different stages of life.
But that's, I think, part of this topic tonight. And again, someone's out there saying that we just babble about things.
That's all right,
that's actually I appreciate that thought and comment because that's absolutely right. We absolutely talk things through.
I thought you were going someplace else with that.
No, we talk things through, and I know that I know this conversation has affected me. We got Sean in the garage, and clearly first time actually being a part of this, and he's been active and just even in the garage wanting to share stories. So that's all part of it. Is that I think that when you're talking about what happened to fall, when you're talking about the seasonal depression, I think I'm of the opinion that it actually can be related to a lot of other things, and the way you handle those said other things can help you with this. And the first thing is taking a step to improve yourself. We're not talking about like this dramatic change, but it's like if you just get depressed because it's cold and snowing and all that stuff, again, there's a lot of different options of what that first step is.
Let me ask you both one question, because the last podcast I was on was a lot more fun than this one. It was
that was the would you rather.
Yeah, that was the would you rather, and I had great stories to tell, and it was
they weren't that great,
jovial, and I could bring it up to people, and it was a great conversation started with new people. Whereas this is it's going to be a challenge here, with CT and all that stuff going on these days. But the question that we ask these days, now that's 32 degrees in the garage, the question that we ask back
48 on your ass.
It's literally 30 degrees on my ass. The question that we asked before was, would you rather be too hot or too cold? And I'll take questions from answers from the audience. Would you rather be this or would you rather be 90 degrees?
I'd take 90.
Yeah.
That's not too hot though.
I would take 90. That's at least a little bit more comfortable. I can sit here and wear.
So we all agree that this is miserable sitting in this.
I wouldn't say it's miserable.
Not miserable.
Way to bring up the mood on that.
Yeah. So speaking of seasonal depression, like my toes are a little cold. It's I guess the gist of it is I think that there is definitely a proportion of it that is 100% mindset, but I can agree that mood, the change of fall, going to shittier weather, being colder, darker, all that stuff definitely plays into effect.
It's not as fun.
It's not as fun if you let it. Now, there are definitely some people that, it affects more than others, but I think everyone has a challenge. I remember in college and probably a little bit after college that if it was a really rainy, shitty night, if you went out to a bar and it was a rainy, shitty night and you decided to go out to the bar, did you have a good time if you went to the bar?
Well, I didn't drink till 2 days before I graduated
Next,
college,
Steve.
so I don't go to bars.
Whether it's in college or other times of your life, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
So my point is that the people that were willing to be out and about on a crazy, terrible night like that were people that wanted to be out. So I 100%, agree with some people that are like, man, we just don't know and things like that. But I'll go back to it is that if you're willing to do something, as you mentioned, if you're willing to go out, if you're willing to be in a social environment, if you're willing to be amongst friends, if you're willing to be amongst a group, that you have a better chance of having a decent hour, night, afternoon than you would have if you just are, staring at a wall and just embracing the suck. And some people can embrace the suck. And, when you go through a bad breakup, you go through a job loss, you do need that time to recoup and to reflect and to be miserable. And that's 100% okay. But at some point, you got to be like, all right, well, shit, that sucked. I got my ass kicked. And now what? And you can either go, all right, man, let's do it. I know I'm not sure if Jake is still listening or not, but, he went through some shit. And you can go through it. But at some point, you got to be like, well, shit, let's go. All right, man.
Yep.
Like that part of my life sucked, but it was 2 months, it was 6 months, it was a week, whatever the case may be. But, the goal is to come out the other side. I'm not going to necessarily say stronger, but just come out the other side and, just keep fighting. And if you're willing to keep fighting and keep going, man, you got a chance. But if you're not willing to keep going, you don't have a chance.
Well, I think
good.
I thought so. I wrote that down.
That
I
was
can
well
see the
said.
notes.
You should write that down, actually.
It's on tape.
All right. That's my new senior quote.
I think that's well said and very powerful. Thank
Do
you.
you remember your senior quote?
I didn't have one.
Did you have a senior quote?
Hale, yeah.
What was your senior quote?
Hell yeah.
Hale, yeah, because
What was your senior quote?
my last name is Hale.
No, I heard you. What was
Stop.
your
All right. Closing remarks, Nate, please.
No, so, I mean, I think you were starting to touch on part of my closing remarks. So, when we're talking about abrupt change, whether it's the weather, whether it's a change in relationship, whether it's a change in job, I think one of the parts, maybe the first part, maybe not the first part, but I think one of the things you have to do is realize that you can't go back and change it. Like, I can't go out and I can't change the weather. I can't change that this relationship ended. I can't change that I lost this job. That's the first part, is to accept what you can control and accept that there are some things that are out of your control. Once you do that, it's like, okay, that's happened. Where am I at now? And then where do I want to be? And develop a plan from where you are to where you want to be. Now, obviously, with the weather, you can't do a whole lot about that, but you can do stuff to where you're not cooped inside all the time. Or if you are cooped up inside all the time, you're not just sitting on the couch in front of the TV just wasting away. Like, you're actually doing something. If you live with someone, guess what? There's two of you that are cooped up inside. Do something together. Like, just because you're inside and with someone else doesn't mean you have to be miserable. Like, do something together, whether it's beneficial for you or for the other person. It doesn't matter. Like, do something. Don't just sit. We had that as a topic one time. Don't just sit there. Do something.
I think it's very applicable here.
And, you know, if you've had a relationship, okay, that one ended. Okay, I can learn from that. It doesn't mean I have to jump back into another relationship right away, but I know what went wrong. I know what I need to change, and I can sit there and I can look for the next opportunity. Same thing with the job. I lost that job. Shit sucks right now. I don't want to stay where I'm at, so I take this job.
Yeah.
That job's not where I want to be at, but it's something. You know, it's something to get me to the next level. And then you get to that, and you just develop a plan.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can't get out of it if you just sit there. You have to work your way through it. And, I mean, that's kind of what I've came into this, and kind of what don't just sit there. You know, actually do something about it.
Yeah, I think that leads into my final thoughts here is that, you know, there are steps. I keep saying you have to take a step. You have to do something, you know. And Sean, thank you for sharing all your stories here in the garage. I mean, I think that's huge, and I think that's something. What?
It's a good H.
Good H?
Good H. Huge.
Thanks. I think that was huge. I think, you know, when we're talking about all this stuff, you know, I actually really, and I'm not fixated on it, but I love that, you know, Rich said that, because I think that is something that, you know, some people have that opinion. I think it speaks to, you know, what we've all talked about. Spencer, you were saying that, you know, some people don't want that help. They don't want, you know, like they're comfortable in that. There's something that this podcast has really brought me, it brought it to light for me, is that people need to talk more. And, you know, when it comes to this stuff of, you know, what happened to fall, when abrupt change happens in your life, and this is I hate to say it, but it's like one of the most simple things. You know, it's like you live another year, you're gonna have another winter. So there is some action there. There's some choice there. That's anything in life. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying, I like what Doug Ruffalo said. You know, not everyone has the tools to deal with these issues.
100%.
Sometimes they have access, you know, to all of this stuff. It's finding what works as an individual thing. But finding is that verb. It's literally, again, what Nate, you were saying, is doing something about it. It's like, you know, taking a step. It's reaching out. It's doing your own research, whatever it is. When you are, you know, bundled up because it's cold outside, or, you know, if you're dealing with, you know, abrupt change and it's leading to those bouts of depression, you know, we've all gone through that. I don't care if you're clinically depressed, if someone's told you and validated you that, no, you are depressed, you need this. It's like everyone deals with that. Some larger than others, and some people can get out of it on their own. Other people need people around them. Other people need to, like, listen to a podcast like this, whatever it might be. But if you don't listen to it and you just shut it down, I think that was a really valid point, that some people be like, you know, fuck these guys. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I've actually had friends that are going through it that have said that to my face. Fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, I do know what you're talking about, because you're fucking miserable. And you don't want to actually do something about it. You'd rather just sit there and bitch. And I'm not going to be that friend that sits there and just listens to you over and over and over again. I'll do what Spencer did to me when I was going through a very, very bad up and down relationship, that he's going to do it. But at one point he told me, he's like, look, bro, like, I'm going to tell you, like, I'll see you. We'll hang out. We'll do all this stuff. And at a certain point, I'm not going to stop asking, but I'm going to wait for the next answer. Like, I'm not expecting anything, but I'm still a friend to you. But at a certain point, you know, we had to come to Jesus, talk. Several over the years. And I was one of those people that actually, like, I didn't enjoy being in that shitty relationship, but I was comfortable. That was what I knew. This is what I was still fighting for that, but everything around me was affected by it, because I was in that. And Dustin, you actually, I haven't said this in a while, but you brought it up on another person's comment, and I think this is something that that I want to end off on is one of my age-old things since we started this podcast was something about a hand in your face. So the issue, when you are so focused on the issue, depression can be one of them, seasonal or otherwise, or a breakup or a job loss, is that when you have that issue and that's all you're really focused on, and that is that close to you, and you have a hand in your face, you can't really see the hand in your face, and you can't see what's beyond it because it's basically blocking. Your vision is that obstructed, and you can't really focus on anything. And that's part of my whole focus mantra, is that the biggest action you can do, and taking that first step is doing something to move that hand further out in front of your face. So as you're looking at it, now your hand is in focus. So the issue's in focus. You have a clear mindset on that, or you're actually working towards that. You're pushing that hand away. And at the same time, you can see beyond it. And that is something that is an action. And that's that first step, is to do something to move that hand out of your face. So for those of you that don't think we know what we're talking about and everything like that, I applaud you for bringing that up, because you know what? We do know what we're talking about when it comes to us. We're not experts, but hopefully this does affect some people out there, and that just talking about it, whether you're sitting there listening to the podcast on audio, you're out in the Facebook Live audience, this is something that brings value to us, and hopefully it brings value to you guys out there. But there are some certain things that you can do in life, but every one of them does actually involve choice.
God, I love that fire.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
But thank you to our sponsors.
One last comment. So I'll wrap it up real quick. So Steve, definitely. So we know what we're talking about when it comes to us. We don't know what we're talking about when it comes to other people, and everyone obviously fights their own battle and things along those lines. We just are basing our own stuff on our own experience. I'll just wrap it up, and I'm not. Fuck it. I'll apologize. Sorry for making this a little bit more of a depressing of a podcast in general.
We're talking about abrupt changes, seasonal depression.
Yeah, no, I'll change it. But that's typically not my bag, is to go in super deep into more not as fun. I don't want to say negative, but kind of deeper, darker subjects. That's just not my jam in general. You know, my whole thing in life is I believe happiness is not necessarily a state of being. It's more of a choice, so you can choose to be happy or not. Now, I get that there's extenuating circumstances, but I think you can wake up every morning and choose to be happy. My grandpa, who is the 96-year-old, who is a internal optimist, you know, when you say is a glass half full or half empty, he always says half full, because there's no benefit to saying that the glass is half empty. So that's kind of how I've tried to go through life, but I am genuinely grateful for you letting me be on this podcast for
I'm happy you're here.
7, 8, 9, whatever it's been. You know, I do expect that gold jacket at some point.
It's at the tailor right now.
Okay, so I'm a size medium.
Always. Extra deep V.
Extra deep V. The deeper the cut, the better the jacket.
I want to say that it wasn't a negative. The whole point of this is trying to put a positive,
so
or at least
you look at
some
fall and you're like, oh my God, these beautiful
there.
leaves, these beautiful trees, they're dying is why they're changing colors.
And now you brought it back. Now, yeah, you're always positive. You're
so
God, look how gorgeous. It's all dying.
Why are all these trees changing colors? Because they're dying.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. Yeah, it was an interesting topic for me to discuss.
This is an interesting turn right there.
I'm glad you guys got to enjoy some of the Pogue, the old Pogue, and hopefully everyone else will get to try it here at some point.
Very good. Thank you very much, Spencer.
Of course, the second cigar is very different than the first cigar.
The Romeo by Romeo Julieta.
Yeah, so I enjoy it, but it's a much, as you were mentioning earlier, Sean. It's a tougher draw, at least on my end, a little bit.
Mine too, actually, and that's one of our sponsors is Altadis, and we're not talking bad about it. I've smoked several of these that smoke very, very well. But again, this might be out of a bad box or whatever. Not a bad box, but a tough one.
I'm working my way through it.
I set mine down, and I'm going to actually go back to it after the podcast, that I can actually focus on that cigar and try to get a little bit focus.
Yeah, but I appreciate y'all's time, and thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. I don't take these podcasts for granted, so thank you for doing them every week, and thank you for allowing me to be on one.
Yeah. And Nate, go ahead with sponsors if you
will. Well,
would.
we want to thank Spencer Lappin for being here for episode 92, for bringing the old Pogue, and also for being the one that provided the microphones for the podcast. That's why we kind of think of you as a fourth sponsor.
The Lappin mics.
The Lappin mics. Here we go. We also want to thank Tinder Box at Easton for providing the EP Carrillo Encore, the number one cigar of the year currently.
Cigar
we also
Aficionado.
And from Cigar Aficionado.
There you go.
We also want to thank Altadis USA for providing the second cigar of the evening, the Romeo by Romeo, instead of the traditional Romeo and Julieta brand label, Romeo by Romeo. And then, of course, the BS Cigar Company. Looking forward to getting the golds back in stores soon. So
2020.
2020 now?
Early 2020.
Okay. Better late than never.
Celebrate the new year with the BS Gold.
I love it. I love it. Steve, you want to carry us?
Fall 2020.
Steve, you want to carry us out?
Yeah, I want to thank everyone. Spencer, Nate, Dustin, the studio audience. Thank you guys for being a part of this. All you guys on Facebook Live, and those of you that are listening on the audio portion of it, like Spencer does every week. I mean, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Overcast, iHeartRadio, and multiple others. It is available. Or you can find us on the Bourbon and BS Podcast Facebook page and also the Bourbon and BS Podcast community page, where you guys all can get involved in the conversation with each other like we do every Thursday or Wednesday night when it comes back to Wednesdays. You can have part of this conversation going on every day, sharing what you're smoking, drinking, and what's going on in your life. No real rules, just to be respectful, and that's what this all is about on any week that we're doing the podcast. So thank you guys very much. Thank you all out there and out there on audio. Cheers. Enjoy your week.